Hello everyone. I just launched this channel and although views are still low, and I'm here to guide you through a relaxing evening. The podcast where we listen, unwind, and fall asleep. I know many of you rely on these tales to drift off to sleep, so I've been grateful if you'd settle in and watch this video before you get too cozy. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I am really hoping we can reach 1,000 subscribers very soon. Your support fuels my continued efforts. I would love to hear from you. Let me know. How do you feel about this? What are your thoughts? Where you're watching from and what time it is there. Reduce your stress by focusing on self-care. Allow yourself to rest and refuel if you are fatigued. Prioritize relaxation and breaks to avoid burnout and stay healthy. I hope you enjoy the stories we share and consider supporting the channel. Thank you for listening, supporting us, and hopefully making this podcast a regular part of your nightly bedtime ritual. My name is Henry and I am your host now. Get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let the tension melt away. The Manor's Curse, Shadows of the Mind, The Whispering Walls. Introduce Blackwood Manor through a chilling prologue. Describe the manor as alive, its walls whispering secrets, the wind howling like a mournful cry. Flashback to 150 years ago, Lord Victor Blackwood's descent into madness, the murder of Isabella and Laurent, and the exorcism that trapped her spirit. End with the manor standing silent, waiting for the next soul to awaken its curse. In the heart of the English countryside, veiled by mist and shrouded in superstition, stands Blackwood Manor, a place where past and present intertwine in a dance of terror. This ancient estate, with its stone walls, whispering secrets, and winds howling like mournful cries, holds a dark legacy of betrayal, murder, and a spirit consumed by vengeance. It is here that Ethan and Clare, a young American couple, arrive to reconnect with their roots and escape the chaos of Boston. But the manor guards secrets, whispers of a curse born from betrayal and a spirit seeking vengeance. As the family gathers, they uncover a legacy of horror that threatens to destroy them all. Is the haunting real, or is it a product of a fractured mind? Dive into a spine-chilling tale where reality and madness blur, and the shadows of the past come alive. Blackwood Manor looms over the village, its towering spires reaching towards the sky like skeletal fingers. The air around it is thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant howl of wind. Inside, the manor's grandeur is overshadowed by a sense of dread, its rooms filled with the scent of old wood and decay. Each creak of the wooden floorboards echoes through the halls, a steady heartbeat that reminds all who enter that they are not alone. Ethan, a man in his late 20s with a keen interest in history, feels a pull to his ancestral home. His curiosity is piqued by the stories of his family's past, which he hopes to uncover. Clare, his wife, is skeptical but excited for the adventure, her artistic mind drawn to the manor's mysterious allure. Together, they decide to take a vacation to Blackwood Manor, despite warnings from Ethan's family. Their decision is met with reluctance, as they agree to bring Sophie, the teenage daughter of a family friend, who is eager to explore the manor's secrets. Upon arrival, the journey through winding roads and thick fog sets the tone for an eerie encounter. The manor greets them with an oppressive silence, its grandeur overshadowed by a sense of dread. The caretakers, Mr. and Mrs. Harrow, welcome them with nervous smiles, their eyes hinting at secrets untold. Clare is drawn to the manor's beauty but notices strange looks from the staff. Ethan's cousin Margaret seems overly interested in Ethan, hinting at unresolved feeling. A stray cat with glowing eyes follows Clare everywhere, its presence a constant reminder of the ominous forces at play. The family is warned about the locked chamber in the East Wing, a place where the past lingers. Clare dismisses the warnings, believing the legend of Isabella's spirit is just a story to hide treasure. She enlists Sophie's help to explore the manor, and they find an old diary belonging to Lord Victor. The diary reveals his obsession with Isabella and the betrayal that led to her death. As they read, strange noises echo through the halls, footsteps, whispers, and the faint sound of French singing. Sophie begins to feel uneasy, but Clare is determined to uncover the truth. That night, Clare experiences her first strange occurrence. Her dress catches fire under mysterious circumstances, and she narrowly escapes harm. The family begins to suspect that Margaret might be possessed by Isabella's spirit, as Margaret has always been emotionally unstable. Ethan is torn between his love for Clare and his growing fear for her safety. He reluctantly calls in Dr. James Carter, a psychiatrist specializing in alleged hauntings, hoping for a rational explanation. Dr. Carter arrives, bringing a sense of calm and logic. He investigates, interviewing each family member, and Sophie confides in him about the diary and their exploration. As he digs deeper, he experiences eerie events, ghostly singing, shadowy figures, and an attempt on Sophie's life. He starts to suspect the haunting may not be supernatural but a product of a fractured mind. He hints that Clare might be the true source of horror, her sympathy for Isabella leading to a fragmented psyche. As the story unfolds, the family dynamics come to the forefront. Margaret's jealousy of Clare, Ethan's guilt over his past, and the loyal but suspicious caretakers add layers to the narrative. The stray cat becomes a recurring symbol of the haunting, its presence always signaling something ominous. Hidden letters and journals reveal the dark history of the Blackwood family, serving as a catalyst for the haunting. The final confrontation takes place in a hidden ritual chamber deep within the manor, filled with symbols of exorcisms in the past. Dr. Carter proposes a risky plan to force Isabella's persona to emerge, hoping to confront and integrate her fractured identity. The family reluctantly agrees, hiring Father Nathaniel Graves, an occult expert, to perform an exorcism as a last resort. Graves, a friend of Carter's, agrees to follow his unconventional plan. On All Hallows' Eve, the manor is filled with tension as they execute their plan, leading to a climactic and terrifying resolution. In the aftermath, Dr. Carter begins intensive therapy with Clare, helping her reintegrate her fractured identity. The family begins to heal, scarred but redeemed. The manor, once a place of horror, becomes a symbol of hope. The stray cat, a constant presence, is seen walking away, as if it too has found peace. Yet, as the manor stands silent, a faint sound echoes, a soft French lullaby, a reminder that the curse lives on, waiting for the next soul to awaken its shadows. The journey begins. In the quiet suburb of Boston, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn of Ethan and Clare's home. The house, with its neatly painted facade, seemed to whisper tales of a life that was picture-perfect. Inside, however, the air was thick with unspoken tensions. Ethan stood by the window, his gaze distant, his mind 1,000 miles away. The letter from a distant relative had arrived weeks ago, speaking of an inherited estate, Blackwood Manor. It was a place his family had whispered about in hushed tones, a place shrouded in mystery and warnings. Yet Ethan felt an inexplicable pull, a magnetic force drawing him to the ancient stones and secrets they held. Clare entered the room, her reflection catching in the windowpane. She was the picture of poise, her hair neatly tied, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady but laced with a hint of skepticism. He turned, meeting her gaze. "I know what you're thinking," he began, his voice tinged with determination. "But I can't ignore this. Blackwood Manor. It's a part of me." Claire sighed, her eyes softening. "I understand, but what about the warnings? Your family? They're just stories," Ethan interrupted, though his voice lacked conviction. "We need this, Claire. A break from chaos, a chance to reconnect." She nodded slowly, a spark of excitement flickering in her eyes. Okay, let's do it. As they began packing, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The creak of the floorboards echoed through the halls, each sound a reminder of the life they were temporarily leaving behind. Sophie, the daughter of a family friend, bounced into the room, her excitement palpable. "Can I come? I've heard so much about old mansions," she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Claire hesitated before nodding. "But you have to promise to stay close." The final decision was met with reluctance from Ethan's family. His aunt, Margaret, her expression a mask of concern, handed him a small, leather-bound book. "Take this. It might help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As they set off, a stray cat watched from the shadows, its eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. The drive was long, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the engine and Sophie's occasional question. The approaching mist swirled around them, shrouding the countryside in an eerie veil. Blackwood Manor loomed ahead, its towers reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. The wind howled, a mournful cry that sent shivers down Claire's spine. "It's beautiful," Sophie breathed, her voice full of awe. Ethan smiled, though his heart raced. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor," he said, stepping out into the chill of the evening. As they entered, the door creaked shut behind them, the sound echoing ominously. The manor was alive with whispers, each wall a keeper of secrets, each shadow a tale untold. And as they settled in, the darkness outside seemed to press in, a reminder that some places hold more than just memories. The journey had begun, and with it, the unraveling of a legacy steeped in horror. Arrival at Blackwood Manor. The GPS had stopped working miles ago, leaving Ethan to navigate the winding, narrow roads that snaked through the English countryside. The dense fog rolled in like a living entity, shrouding the world in a damp, gray mist. It clung to the car windows, obscuring their view, and seemed to muffle every sound except the soft hum of the engine and the occasional creak of the old vehicle. Claire fidgeted in the passenger seat, her hands tightly clutching the armrests. The silence between them was heavy, interrupted only by the occasional crackle of the radio, which offered nothing but static. She glanced at Ethan, whose jaw was clenched as he focused on the road ahead. His sharp profile was illuminated by the faint light of the dashboard, and for a moment Claire felt a pang of worry. He had been distant since they decided to come here, his usual optimism overshadowed by some unspoken dread. Behind them, Sophie was quiet too, her eyes fixed on the fog pressing against the rear window. She had brought her headphones but hadn't put them on. Her curiosity about the manor piqued. Margaret, seated beside her, stared out the window with a mixture of unease and bitterness. She had made it clear she didn't want to come, but Ethan had insisted, saying it was an opportunity for them all to reconnect. The car's tires crunched against the gravel as they turned into the manor's driveway. The sound was sharp, breaking the oppressive silence. The trees lining the path were bare, their branches clawing at the fog like skeletal fingers. A chill ran down Claire's spine as she leaned forward, her breath fogging the glass. And then, as if emerging from the fog itself, Blackwood Manor came into view. It was a sprawling structure, its stone facade weathered and covered in ivy that seemed to cling to it like a desperate lover. The windows were tall and narrow, their glass cloudy with age, reflecting the gray mist like mirrors. The roof was a patchwork of slate tiles, some missing, allowing glimpses of the wooden beams beneath. The manor loomed before them, its grandeur undeniable but overshadowed by an aura of decay and neglect. "Wow," Sophie breathed, her voice breaking the spell. Something," Margaret muttered, her tone laced with disbelief. Claire felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something unsettling about the manor, something that made her feel like it was watching them. She turned to Ethan, who had stopped the car but hadn't moved. His eyes were fixed on the manor, his expression unreadable. "Ethan," she prompted softly. He snapped out of his trance, offering her a forced smile. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor," he said, his voice light but unconvincing. The group filed out of the car, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. The air was cold and damp, carrying the scent of moss and decay. As they approached the manor, the front door creaked open, and two figures stepped out. Mr. and Mrs. Harrow, the caretakers, greeted them with tight, nervous smiles. Mr. Harrow was a tall, gaunt man with sunken eyes and a pale complexion. His wife was shorter, her face pinched and her hands wringing a worn handkerchief. They exchanged awkward pleasantries, their voices low and hesitant. "It's been a long time," Mr. Harrow said, his voice gravelly. "We weren't expecting so many guests." Ethan assured him it was just for a week, but the man's unease was palpable. As they stepped inside, Clare noticed the way Mrs. Harrow glanced at her, her eyes flicking away quickly. It was a look she couldn't quite place, part suspicion, part pity. The interior of the manor was as imposing as its exterior. The foyer was vast, with a chandelier hanging crookedly from the ceiling, its crystals dulled by years of grime. A sweeping staircase curved upward, its carpet worn and frayed. Portraits lined the walls, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow as Clare moved. She felt a chill as she met the gaze of a woman in one of the paintings, a woman with piercing green eyes and raven black hair, her expression sorrowful yet defiant. "Who is that?" Clare asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Harrow hesitated before answering. "That would be Lady Isabella Blackwood." Before Clare could ask more, a faint meow broke the silence. She turned toward the sound and saw a stray cat sitting on the stairs. It was a sleek black feline with piercing yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. It watched her intently, its tail twitching. "Don't mind Midnight," Mr. Harrow said dismissively. "He's just a stray. Keeps to himself, mostly." But as they moved deeper into the manor, Clare noticed the cat following her, its eyes never leaving hers. It moved silently, its presence unnervingly constant. The bedrooms were spread across the second floor, each one as cold and unsettling as the last. Ethan and Clare were given a room at the far end of the hall, its bed covered in a heavy, musty quilt. The window rattled in the wind, and the sound sent a shiver down Clare's spine. As the family unpacked, the tension between them became harder to ignore. Margaret lingered in the hallway, her eyes darting between Ethan and Clare with an intensity that made Clare uncomfortable. She had always known Margaret harbored feelings for Ethan, but seeing it now, in this place, made it feel dangerous. "Let's get settled," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "We can talk more over dinner?" Dinner was a strained affair, the conversation stilted and forced. The manor's dining room was grand but decaying, the long table set with dusty china and silverware that had lost its shine. Mrs. Harrow served a simple but unappetizing meal, her hands trembling as she placed the dishes on the table. As they ate, the silence was broken only by the sound of clinking silverware and the occasional creak of the old house. It was as if the manor itself was listening, waiting. And then, just as they were finishing, a loud bang echoed from upstairs. It was sharp and sudden, making everyone jump. "What was that?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling. Mr. Harrow pushed his chair back, his face pale. "Just the house settling," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. As the night wore on, the shadows in the manor seemed to grow longer, darker. The fire in the hearth crackled and spat, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Clare sat on the edge of her chair, her eyes darting toward the stairs. The stray cat, Midnight, sat by the fire, its glowing eyes fixed on her. And then, as the clock struck midnight, a low, mournful whisper seemed to fill the room. It was soft, indistinct, but undeniable. "Did you hear that?" Margaret asked, her voice sharp with fear. Ethan shook his head, but Clare knew she wasn't imagining it. The whisper seemed to come from all around them, echoing in the walls themselves. As the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. and with them the shadows seemed to twist and writhe, taking on forms that were almost, but not quite, recognizable. It was then that Clare realized the manor was alive, and it was watching them all. The Forbidden Wing. The east wing of Blackwood Manor loomed before Clare and Sophie like a forgotten sentinel, its air thick with the scent of decay and secrets. Dust motes floated lazily in the dim light, catching the faint rays that struggled through grimy windows. Cobwebs clung to corners, glistening like ghostly tapestries. Each step echoed with a deep creak, a rhythmic creak that seemed to count their heartbeats. Sophie hesitated, her hand on the cold doorknob, her voice a whisper. "Clare, maybe we shouldn't. It feels wrong." Her eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and excitement, but Clare just smiled, her determination unwavering. "Come on, Sophie. It's just an old story. Besides, I heard there might be treasure hidden here. Imagine the adventure." Claire's voice was steady, but her heart raced with anticipation. As they approached the entrance, the stray cat appeared, its glowing eyes watching them with an unblinking stare. Sophie gasped, but Clare merely nodded, as if the cat's presence was expected. "Let's go," she said, pushing through the doorway. Inside, the Forbidden Wing was a maze of narrow corridors and shadowy alcoves. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, its faded floral pattern, a reminder of times long past. Portraits hung crookedly, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow the girls as they moved. They stumbled upon a locked chamber, its door heavy and unyielding. Claire's eyes sparkled with challenge. "I bet the key is around here somewhere." She searched, her fingers brushing over dusty surfaces, until she found a rusty key hidden in a cobwebbed vase. The key turned with a satisfying clunk and the door creaked open. The room was small, filled with the musty scent of age. Shelves lined with ancient books and peculiar artifacts stretched towards the ceiling. In the center, a black leather diary lay on a dusty table, adorned with a strange, symbol embossed lock. Claire's fingers trembled as she opened it, the pages revealing Lord Victor's erratic handwriting. As they read, Lord Victor's descent into madness became clear. His love for Isabella turned to obsession and rage when she chose another. The betrayal and murder were detailed in frantic scribbles, followed by an exorcism that trapped her spirit. Suddenly, the air shifted. Footsteps echoed in the distance, thud, thud. Whispers followed, a soft, indistinguishable hiss. Then, a faint French lullaby floated through the air, melancholy and sweet. Sophie clutched Claire's arm, her breath coming in short gasps. "What was that?" she whispered. "Probably just the house settling," Clare replied, but her voice lacked conviction. As they read on, shadows flickered at the edge of their vision. Sophie saw a figure and screamed, but when Clare turned, there was nothing. The tension was palpable, the silence oppressive. Then a loud bang echoed, making both girls jump. The lights flickered and the door slammed shut, trapping them. Darkness enveloped them, except for the cat's glowing eyes peering from the shadows. "We're not alone," Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. Claire's heart pounded, but she stood firm. "We just need to find another way out." As they fumbled through the darkness, the whispers grew louder, the footsteps closer. The cat's eyes led them deeper into the wing, each step gamble between fear and curiosity. The past was alive in Blackwood Manor, and Clare and Sophie were about to uncover its darkest secrets. In the end, they found another door, slightly ajar, leading back to the main manor. Relieved, they stumbled out, the cat watching from the shadows. Though shaken, Clare was more determined than ever to uncover the truth, even as the manor whispered its warnings. The first signs. As nightfall wrapped around Blackwood Manor, the shadows stretched long and sinister, like dark fingers grasping for anyone daring to stay. The wind howled through the empty halls, sounding like a mournful cry that echoed through the walls. The creaks and groans of the old manor were louder in the silence of the night, each sound making Clare jump as she readied for bed. Claire stood in front of the antique mirror, her reflection flickering in the dim light. She felt a shiver run down her spine, but she brushed it off as mere nervousness. The manor was old, after all, and old houses made noise. As she slipped into her dress, she noticed the stray cat watching her from the corner of the room, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She shooed it away, but it lingered as if waiting for something. Downstairs, the family was gathered in the living room. Margaret was quieter than usual, her eyes fixed on the fire crackling in the hearth. Ethan and Sophie were engrossed in a board game, their laughter a stark contrast to the ominous atmosphere. But the peace was short-lived. A scream pierced the night, sharp and terrified. Claire stumbled into the room, her dress scorched and sang, the smell of smoke clinging to her. What happened? Ethan rushed to her side, his face pale with fear. I don't know, Claire stammered, her hands trembling. I was getting ready for bed and then I smelled smoke. My dress, it just caught fire. Her voice shook and tears welled up in her eyes. The room was silent, the only sound of the crackling of the fire. Margaret's eyes snapped towards Claire, a flicker of something strange crossing her face. Sophie looked scared, her young mind struggling to understand what was happening. I think it's her, Margaret whispered, her voice low and uneven. Isabella, she's here, and she's angry. Ethan frowned. Margaret, that's enough. This has to be some kind of accident. But his voice lacked conviction. He glanced at Claire, who was still shaking. I need to get to the bottom of this, he said, standing up. I'll call Dr. Carter. Dr. James Carter arrived the next morning, his presence calm and professional. He listened intently as Ethan recounted the events, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. I see, he said after Ethan finished. I'll need to speak with everyone, especially Claire and Margaret. As Dr. Carter began his assessments, Claire found herself withdrawing. She couldn't shake the feeling that the manor was watching her, waiting for her to discover more secrets. She had found a hidden letter earlier that day, tucked away in an old drawer. The handwriting was elegant but frantic, speaking of betrayal and a curse that could never be broken. That night, as the family settled in, the atmosphere was tense. Sophie was quieter than usual, her curiosity overshadowed by fear. The cat was nowhere to be seen, but Claire could swear she heard its presence, a soft mewling that seemed to come from nowhere. As the night wore on, the creaks and groans of the manor grew louder, more insistent. It sounded as if someone was walking the halls, the footsteps heavy and deliberate. Claire lay in bed, her heart pounding, wondering if she was losing her mind or if the manor was indeed haunted. She drifted off to sleep, only to be jolted awake by a loud thud. Sitting up, she listened, but the house was silent once more. Maybe it was just her imagination, she told herself. But deep down, she knew something was very wrong. And as she lay there, she could have sworn she heard a faint whisper, soft and sorrowful, speaking a name she didn't recognize. Laurent ... The name sent a chill down her spine, and she knew she had to uncover the truth before it was too late. The dark truth. The dim glow of the evening sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Dr. Carter's study, casting long shadows across the room. The air was thick with tension as Dr. Carter sat behind his desk, his expression grave. Ethan fidgeted in his chair, the creak of the leather echoing the unease in his heart. Ethan, Dr. Carter began, his voice steady but laced with concern. I've been reviewing Clare's sessions, and there's something you need to know. Ethan's hands clenched into fists, his mind racing. What is it? Dr. Carter hesitated, then revealed Clare is experiencing blackouts, memory lapses. She's taken on the persona of Isabella from the story of the manor's curse. Ethan's breath caught, disbelief tangling with fear. How could this be? He remembered the subtle signs, Clare's distant stares, her sudden mood shifts. But he had dismissed them as stress, as adjustment to their new life. A flashback hit him, Clare standing in the garden, her eyes vacant, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, do you hear that?" she asked, her gaze distant. Now it made sense. She wasn't just listening to the wind. She was hearing Isabella's whispers. The creak of the manor's floorboards outside the study broke the silence. Ethan stood, determination etched on his face. He needed to see Clare, to confront the truth. In the forbidden wing, Clare sat in the dim light, the diary open in her lap. Her eyes glazed over, her voice a whisper. "Isabella, they wronged you." As Ethan approached, her head snapped up. Her eyes, once warm and familiar, now held a colder intensity. "Ethan," she said, her voice low, almost a purr. "You're just in time to join me in this dance." Ethan's heart pounded. Before him stood Isabella, not Clare. The transformation was eerie. Her posture, her voice, everything shifted. Back in the study, the family gathered, the revelation hanging in the air. Margaret's jealousy flared into anger, while Henry looked on, confused and scared. Sophie, her schizophrenia a red herring, shook with fear. "She's going to hurt us," Sophie whispered, her eyes wide. The stray cat appeared outside, its eyes glowing like lanterns in the dark. It watched, a silent omen. The manor creaked and groaned, each sound a reminder of the darkness within its walls. In the manor's depths, hidden letters revealed the extent of Clare's plan, framing Margaret, eliminating Sophie out of jealousy in the final act, killing Ethan on All Hallows Eve. The family knew they had to act. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within, the manor's presence looming over them like a specter. As the chapter closed, the manor stood silent, waiting. The cat's eyes flickered, a beacon of the horror to come. The darkness within Clare had just begun to surface, and the manor, ever patient, watched and waited. The desperate plan? The dim glow of the study's lamp cast long shadows on the walls as Ethan paced back and forth, the wooden floorboards creaking with each step. The air was thick with tension, heavy with unspoken fears. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, its mournful cry echoing the turmoil within the manor. Ethan's mind raced, torn between his love for Clare and the growing fear of what she might become. He had always been her rock, her safe haven, but now he wasn't sure if he could protect her from herself. Dr. Carter sat in a high-backed chair, his hands clasped together as he watched Ethan's restless movements. "We need to confront the Isabella persona head-on," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The longer we wait, the more control she can gain." Ethan stopped pacing and turned to face the doctor, his eyes filled with a mix of desperation and fear. "Are you sure this is the only way?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter nodded. "It's the only way to integration, Ethan. We have to force her to confront the truth." Reluctantly, Ethan agreed. The plan was set in motion, and the family gathered in the dining room, their faces pale and drawn. Margaret's jealousy simmered just below the surface, her eyes narrowing as she watched Clare, who sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Henry shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting towards Sophie, who sat at the end of the table, her gaze fixed on some point beyond the walls. As the family discussed the plan, the cat appeared once more, its presence a constant reminder of the supernatural forces at play. It sat in the corner, its glowing eyes fixed on Clare, as if watching her, waiting for her to slip. That night, Ethan found himself standing in the chapel, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was cold, the scent of incense and aged wood filling his nostrils. Father Graves, a tall, imposing man with a stern face, stood before the altar, his hands resting on a leather-bound book. "I can help," Father Graves said, his voice deep and resonant. "But you must trust me." Ethan hesitated, but the weight of the situation pressed down on him. He nodded, and the priest began to prepare for the exorcism, his hands moving with practiced precision. The sound of pages turning, the rustle of fabric, the soft murmur of Latin words filled the chapel, creating a sense of foreboding. As the night wore on, the family gathered in the ritual chamber, their breath visible in the cold air. The walls were lined with ancient symbols, their meanings long forgotten, but their power still palpable. The room was heavy with anticipation. The air was thick with fear. Clare sat in the center of the room, her eyes closed, her hands bound to a chair. Dr. Carter stood beside her, his eyes fixed on her face. "It's time," he said, his voice steady. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward, his heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. "Clare," he said, his voice soft, "we're here to help you." But as he spoke, Claire's eyes flickered open, and for a moment, Ethan saw something else looking back at him, something ancient and vengeful. The room seemed to hold its breath, the silence oppressive, and then everything went black. The chapter ends here, leaving the listeners on the edge of their seats, wondering what will happen next. The slow building tension and the shocking twist at the end ensure that the story remains engaging and unforgettable. The Night of Vengeance. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over Blackwood Manor. The wind whispered through the empty halls, and the trees creaked with an eerie rhythm. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Dr. Carter sat in the dimly lit study, his eyes fixed on Ethan, who fidgeted in his chair. "Ethan, you must be firm. Tonight is the only chance we have to save Clare," Dr. Carter urged, his voice low but determined. Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what had to be done, but the thought of confronting Clare filled him with dread. The clock on the wall struck 10, its deep chime echoing through the manor. "It's time," Ethan muttered, standing up. He took a deep breath and made his way to the library where Clare had been reading the hidden letters. As he entered, the creak of the wooden floorboards beneath his feet echoed in the silent room. Clare sat by the window, the moonlight casting her shadow on the wall. The stray cat was curled up beside her, its eyes gleaming in the dark. Ethan approached her, his voice trembling. "Clare, we need to talk." She looked up, her eyes narrowing. "What is it, Ethan?" she asked, her voice cold. Ethan hesitated, then blurted out, "You're not yourself, Clare. You've been acting strange, and we're worried." Claire's expression changed, her eyes widening in anger. "You don't understand," she shouted, her voice rising. The cat hissed and darted out of the room, its tail flicking like a whip. The lights flickered, and the air grew colder. "Clare, stop," Ethan pleaded, but it was too late. Her demeanor shifted, her voice taking on a French accent. "You betrayed me, Victor," she spat, her eyes blazing with fury. Ethan took a step back, fear gripping his heart. "Clare, it's me, Ethan. Snap out of it." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked out of the library, her movements stiff and determined. Ethan followed her, his mind racing. They moved through the dark corridors, the shadows deepening around them. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the distant sound of whispers echoed in their ears. They reached the ritual chamber, hidden deep within the manor. The walls were lined with ancient symbols, their meanings forgotten over the years. Father Graves stood in the center, his hands clasped together. "It's time," he said, his voice solemn. Ethan nodded, his throat dry. Clare entered, her eyes fixed on him. "You," she growled, her voice low and menacing. "You have to pay for what you did." Ethan stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Clare, please." "No," she screamed, lunging at him. Ethan dodged, but she was too fast. She grabbed him, her nails digging into his skin. "You can't escape me." Suddenly, Father Graves stepped forward, holding up a crucifix. "In the name of the Lord, I command you to leave this place," he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. Claire's eyes widened and she let go of Ethan, stumbling back. The cat appeared in the doorway, its eyes glowing in the dark. It hissed, then turned and ran. Ethan took advantage of the distraction. He grabbed the dummy from behind the curtain and thrust it forward. "Look, Clare," "It's Victor," he shouted. Claire's eyes snapped to the dummy, her face twisted in rage. "You!" she screamed, rushing at it with a knife. "You'll never hurt me again." The dummy collapsed to the ground with a thud. Claire stood over it, her chest heaving. Then her body went limp, and she fell to the floor, unconscious. The room was silent. Ethan stared at Claire, his heart heavy. "Is it over?" he whispered. Dr. Carter knelt beside her, checking her pulse. "It's done," he said softly. "Claire is free." Ethan nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. He knelt beside Claire, holding her hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." The manor creaked around them, the wind howling outside. The cat was nowhere to be found, but its presence lingered, a reminder of the night's events. Ethan looked up at Dr. Carter and Father Graves, who stood silently in the shadows. "What now?" he asked. Dr. Carter sighed. "We take Claire home. She needs rest, and we need to make sure she's okay." Ethan nodded. He looked down at Claire, her face peacefully in sleep. He hoped she would be okay, and the nightmare was finally over. But as he stood up, he heard a faint meow from the hallway. He turned, but there was nothing there. The manor was silent once more, its secrets buried deep within its walls. The aftermath. The grand dining hall of Blackwood Manor, once a witness to the family's turmoil, now echoed with the faint clatter of china and the murmured conversations of a family grappling with healing. Dr. Carter sat at the head of the table, his eyes keenly observing the dynamics around him. Claire, her posture slightly hunched, pushed her food around her plate, her gaze occasionally drifting towards the windows where the stray cat had last been seen. The therapy sessions had begun, each one a step into the labyrinth of Claire's mind. Dr. Carter's voice was calm, a soothing anchor in the storm of her thoughts. "Claire, can you tell me how you're feeling today?" he asked, his pen poised over his notebook. Claire's fingers trembled as she reached for her water glass, the condensation beading on her fingertips. I feel better," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes I hear whispers that don't feel like mine. The room seemed to hold its breath, the creak of the old wooden floorboards beneath Ethan's feet breaking the silence. He placed a reassuring hand on Claire's shoulder, his warm and steady touch. "We're here for you," he said, his voice firm but gentle. Margaret, seated across from them, watched the exchange with a mix of relief and unease. Her hands folded in her lap betrayed her tension through the whites of her knuckles. The forgiveness had come at a cost, the wound still raw but no longer festering. She glanced at Dr. Carter, his eyes meeting hers with a promise of understanding. The diamond on her finger sparkled under the chandelier, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. As the evening wore on, the manor seemed to exhale, its walls no longer oppressive, but still whispering secrets in the wind. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like spectral fingers across the walls. Outside, the stray cat, now a silhouette against the moonlit garden, turned for one last look at the manor before vanishing into the night. The soft thud of the front door closing echoed through the hallway, a sound that was both final and lingering. The manor's atmosphere had shifted, the air lighter, yet the shadows held a residual darkness. Clare, walking through the empty halls, felt the weight of Isabella's presence lessening, replaced by a sense of peace that was almost tangible. But as she passed through a door hidden behind a tapestry, a faint whisper seemed to follow her, a soft Clare that she couldn't place. Dr. Carter, ever the observer, noted the slight hesitation in her step, the flicker of doubt in her eyes. He knew the road to healing was long, and the mind, once fractured, could still play tricks. But for now, there was hope. As night fell, the family retired, each to their own quarters. The manor's silence was broken only by the distant hooting of an owl. The cat, gone, left behind a small leather-bound book on the windowsill. Its pages, filled with French script, told a story of love and betrayal, but the last page was blank, save for a single sentence. La vengeance n'est jamais vraiment terminée. Vengeance is never truly over. The manor stood tall, its walls whispering secrets to the wind, as the shadows within its halls seemed to shift, ever so slightly, hinting that the curse, though dormant, was not forgotten. The line between reality and madness remained blurred, a reminder that some horrors, once awakened, never truly sleep. And so the darkness lingered, a shadow in the corner, waiting, watching, as the manor, a witness to it all, stood silent, its curse a tale now past, but never truly gone. The Forgotten Room, a disturbing memory that never existed. The old house loomed before me, its windows like empty eyes staring back. I hadn't set foot here in years, yet the familiar creak of the front gate brought a wave of nostalgia. But something felt off, like a faint hum in the air that didn't belong. My mother's illness had brought me back, and my younger brother Daniel was insistent that the house had changed. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia, but the night I heard the scratching in the walls, I realized something was terribly wrong. The scratching sounded like scritch-scratch, rhythmic yet unsettling. It was as if something was clawing its way through the plaster. I tried to ignore it, but the whispers that followed were harder to dismiss. They called my name, soft and insistent, echoing down the hallway. My mother, frail and confused, muttered about someone missing, her eyes clouded with early dementia. She spoke of a boy, a brother I had never known, with a name that felt familiar yet distant. Daniel's fear was palpable. He would follow me everywhere, his eyes wide with terror. One night, he screamed, his face pale as he pointed to the end of the hallway. There, where a closet should have been, stood the door. It wasn't there before, I was sure of it. The door was old, with a rusted doorknob and a keyhole that seemed to stare like an empty eye. My heart pounded as I reached out, the metal cold under my touch. Inside the room, dust motes danced in the faint light. A bed stood in the center, its quilt worn and frayed, emitting a musty odor. A child's drawing on the wall depicted a family of 4, but I only recognized 3. A toy train set circled endlessly, its clickety-clack sound echoing through the room. But we had never owned such a toy. On the nightstand, a photograph showed my parents, Daniel, and a boy who looked just like me. His smile was identical, yet I had no memory of him. Confusion and fear gripped me as I turned to leave. The air felt thick, heavy with secrets. My reflection in a dusty mirror flickered as if something moved just out of sight. The house seemed to shift around me, corridors leading to nowhere, doors appearing where they shouldn't. My mind raced, questioning my own identity. Daniel's breakdown came suddenly. He spoke of 3 children, not 2, his voice shaking. He found a home video labeled Summer, all 3 of us. The screen flickered, distorting, and memories flooded my mind. Memories that weren't mine. A brother, laughing, playing, but gone. My mother's confession came in whispers. The boy was real, taken by something that erased him from our memories. She wept, her words trembling. It is coming back. The house seemed to close in around us, the walls breathing with a sinister life. The night Daniel disappeared, the Forgotten Room's door was wide open, a black void within. Whispers turned to screams as I stepped inside. The floor bent beneath me, and I felt myself slipping into memories that weren't mine. In this other world, the house was rotting, photographs showing a face that wasn't mine. And then I saw him, the forgotten brother, waiting in the darkness. The choice was clear. Remember him and risk taking his place, or forget and escape. The whispers pleaded, choose, stay or forget. I chose to forget, waking up in a house that felt right, yet something was missing, a shadow in the window, a name whispered in the wind. I remember you, it echoed, leaving me with a lingering sense of unease. The horror of the Forgotten Room forever etched in my mind. The call from home. The phone rang late one evening, shrill in the silence of my apartment. I hesitated, the number flashing as unknown, but something compelled me to answer. On the other end was my younger brother, Daniel, his voice trembling. "You need to come home," he urged, his words clipped with fear. I hadn't spoken to Daniel in years, our estrangement a chasm widened by time and unspoken resentments. But the desperation in his voice was undeniable. "Home?" I repeated the word foreign on my lips. Our childhood home in Willow Creek was a place I'd left behind, along with the memories it held. Daniel's reply was laced with urgency. "Mom's not right. She's talking about someone missing, someone who isn't there." I sighed, rolling my eyes. Mom's early dementia had been a topic of family discussions, though I'd avoided involvement. But Daniel's words struck a chord. He mentioned the house felt different, as though it had shifted and changed. I dismissed it as his paranoia, but the seed of doubt was planted. Reluctantly, I agreed to visit. The drive to Willow Creek was a blur of nostalgia and dread. The town was unchanged, streets lined with maple trees and the familiarity of a small community. But as I turned onto our street, a shiver ran down my spine. The house loomed before me, its once cheerful facade now weathered and grim. Daniel greeted me at the door, his eyes sunken, his face pale. He was thinner than I remembered, his hair disheveled. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old books and something else, stale, almost metallic. The house creaked underfoot, the floorboards protesting my presence. Mom sat in her armchair, knitting needles, clicking rhythmically in her hands. Her eyes, once sharp and bright, were cloudy, her gaze wandering. She looked up as I entered, a flicker of recognition followed by confusion. "Ethan," she murmured, then hesitated. "Or..." I exchanged a glance with Daniel, who nodded grimly. "She does that," he whispered. "Calls you different names, talks about someone else." That night, the house seemed to hum with an eerie energy. The wind outside whispered through the gaps, creating an unsettling melody. I tried to sleep, but the silence was oppressive. Then, it started. A low scratch in the walls, like fingernails on wood. I froze, my heart pounding. The sound paused, then resumed, steady and deliberate. "Daniel," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. I threw off the covers and padded to his room, finding it empty. The hallway stretched before me, dark and endless. Then, I saw it, a door at the far end, slightly ajar. I could swear it hadn't been there before. Curiosity overcame fear, and I approached it cautiously. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a set of stairs leading into darkness. The scratching grew louder, accompanied by faint whispers, my name carried on the air. My skin crawled. I called out, "Who's there?" But the silence that followed was more terrifying. Returning to my room, I tried to convince myself it was the house settling, or a raccoon in the walls. But the whispers lingered in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that the house itself was watching. As I lay awake, the shadows cast by the moonlight danced on the walls, twisting into grotesque forms. The air felt colder, the silence now oppressive. It was as though the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. And then, just as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I heard it again. The scratch, insistent and unrelenting. This time, it was closer. The impossible door. The house was quiet when I arrived, its familiar creaks and groans echoing through the empty halls. My brother Daniel was pacing in the living room, his eyes wide with fear. He had always been the nervous type, prone to paranoia and wild ideas, but this time, something was different. His hands were trembling, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "You don't understand," he said, grabbing my arm as I set my bag down. "The house, it's changing. I've seen things. Doors, hallways, rooms that weren't here before. And the noises, oh God, the noises at night. I sighed, trying to reassure him. Danny, Mom's been sick and you're stressed. It's just your imagination running wild. But Daniel wasn't so easily calmed. No, you don't get it. Mom's been acting weird too. She keeps talking about someone else. A boy. A son she doesn't have. She keeps saying, "Where's my baby? Where's my little boy?" I froze at that. Our mother had always been sharp, though her memory had begun to slip with the early stages of dementia. But this was something else. Don't worry, I lied. It's just her confusion. She'll get better. But Daniel wasn't convinced. He dragged me through the house, pointing out things that didn't feel right. The way the light flickered in the kitchen. The sound of footsteps upstairs when no one was there. The faint scratching in the walls, like fingernails on wood. And then he stopped at the end of the hallway. "There," he said, pointing to a blank wall. "That's where it is. The door. I've seen it every night since Mom got sick, but when I try to open it, it's gone." I rolled my eyes. "Daniel, there's nothing there. You're just stressed." And then I saw it. At the end of the hallway, right where Daniel had pointed, there was a door. It wasn't just any door. It was a heavy oak-colored door with a brass handle, its surface etched with strange symbols that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. I blinked, wondering if I was hallucinating, but when I opened my eyes again, it was still there. "See?" Daniel whispered. "I told you." I approached the door slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt wrong, like it didn't belong. The wall around it seemed to sag, as if the wood itself were bending to accommodate something that shouldn't exist. I reached out to touch the handle, hesitating when my hand hovered an inch above it. It felt cold, even through the air. "Don't," Daniel said, grabbing my arm. "You shouldn't open it." But I had to know. I had to prove to myself, and to Daniel, that this was just some kind of trick, a weird architectural quirk. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. What I saw made my blood run cold. On the other side of the door was a room, a bedroom, untouched for decades. The walls were painted a faint blue, the bed covered in a worn quilt. A child's drawing of a tree hung crookedly on the wall, and a toy train set circled endlessly on a small table. But none of it belonged to us. I felt a chill as I stepped inside, my shoes creaking against the wooden floor. The air smelled stale, like it had been locked away for years. "Who does this belong to?" I murmured, running my hand over the quilt. It felt real, too real. Daniel didn't answer. He just stood in the doorway, his face as pale as the wall. And then I saw it. On the nightstand, next to the bed, was a photograph. It showed a family, my parents, Daniel Dardell, and a boy I had never seen before. He looked just like me. I picked up the photo, my hand shaking. The glass felt cold against my fingers, and the image seemed to ripple as if it were underwater. "Who is this?" I demanded, turning to Daniel. But Daniel just shook his head. "I don't know, but I remember him." His voice was barely audible. "I remember playing with him, laughing with him, but I also remember something else." What? Daniel's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw something there, something dark, something buried deep. "I remember the day he disappeared," he whispered. I felt a knot in my stomach. "Daniel, we don't have another brother. We never did." But Daniel just stared at the photo, his expression unreadable. "Do you remember him?" he asked. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him he was crazy, that this was all some twisted hallucination. But as I looked at the photo, something shifted inside me. A memory, a fleeting, fragmented memory, surfaced. A boy with my face, laughing in the backyard. A boy with my voice calling out to me. And then it was gone. I dropped the photo, my heart racing. "No," I said, backing away from the bed. This isn't real. None of this is real. But the door was real. The room was real. And the memories, those were real too. As I turned to leave, I noticed something else. On the wall and in faint red letters, someone had scrawled a single word. Mine. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I slammed the door shut and grabbed Daniel, pulling him back down the hallway. What is this? I hissed. What's going on with this house? Daniel didn't answer. He just kept shaking his head, his eyes wide with fear. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. The door hadn't been there before. None of this had been there before. And now, it was impossible to ignore. The forgotten room. As I stood before the door at the end of the hallway, the wooden floor beneath my feet creaked softly like an old sigh. The air around me felt heavy, thick with the scent of dust and forgotten memories. Daniel hovered close behind, his breath quick and nervous against the back of my neck. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears like a countdown to something inevitable. The door itself was unremarkable, plain with an old brass doorknob that gleamed faintly in the dim light. Yet, it was out of place, a stranger in a familiar setting. My mind wrestled with the idea that this door, this room, could exist in a house I thought I knew so well. I reached out, my hand trembling as I grasped the cold metal of the doorknob. It turned with a reluctant click, the sound sharp and final. As the door swung open, a faint whisper of air brushed past me, carrying with it the faint scent of lavender, and something else, something metallic, like old blood. The room beyond was shrouded in shadows, the sunlight from the hallway barely reaching past the threshold. I fumbled for the light switch, my fingers brushing against the cool plaster wall. The switch clicked, and a dim yellowed light flickered to life, revealing a space that seemed frozen in time. The room was small, with cream-colored walls adorned with faint cracks that spider-webbed towards the ceiling. A single bed sat against one wall, its mattress covered in a quilt with a pattern I didn't recognize. Flowers and vines in faded hues of blue and green. The bed was neatly made as if waiting for someone to return. A child's drawing hung on the wall opposite the bed. Crayon scribbles of a house, a son, and what looked like a family. 2 adults and 3 children. My breath caught as I noticed the third child, drawn with careful detail yet unfamiliar to me. Beside the bed stood an old nightstand, its surface covered in a thin layer of dust. On top of it was a photograph in a brass frame, slightly tarnished. I picked it up, my fingers leaving prints in the dust. The picture showed a family. My parents, Daniel, and a boy I had never seen before. He stood beside me, a mirror image in every way. Same smile, same eyes, same messy brown hair. But I had no memory of him. My stomach twisted with a mix of fear and confusion. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel shifted uncomfortably behind me, his silence answering my question. I turned to him, his face pale and drawn. "Daniel, who is this?" He shook his head, his eyes wide. "I don't know, but I remember him, like I really remember him. We played together, had birthday parties, went on trips. He was my brother." His words hung in the air like a challenge. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that this was all some twisted imagination. But the photograph in my hand told a different story. The boy in the picture looked back at me, his smile familiar yet foreign. I set the frame down, my hand trembling. The room seemed to grow colder as I moved closer to the bed. A toy train set circled silently on a loop, the cars clattering softly as they passed. It was intricate, with detailed houses and trees, a miniature world. I had never seen it before, yet it felt familiar. I reached out, brushing my finger against the cool metal of the train. It stopped abruptly, the sudden silence more unnerving than the sound itself. "Did we ever have a train like this?" I asked, turning to Daniel. He shook his head, his eyes fixed on the train as if it might start moving again. "No, but I remember playing with it. I remember the way it sounded, like clack, clack, clack. The sound echoed in my mind, vivid and real. I stepped back, my heart racing. The room was playing tricks on me, making me question what was real and what wasn't. I glanced around, taking in every detail. The old dresser with its drawers slightly ajar. The closet door that seemed to lean inward, as if pushed by an invisible hand. Everything was so perfectly placed, so untouched, that it felt like a shrine to a life that never was. I moved to the dresser, pulling open the top drawer. Inside I found rows of clothes, neatly folded and smelling faintly of mothballs. A small t-shirt caught my eye, its front stained with what looked like chocolate ice cream. I lifted it, the fabric soft and worn. It was a child's shirt, too small for me, but the size seemed right for a boy around Daniel's age. I set it back, my mind racing. Whose clothes were these? And why were they here? The closet door creaked softly, drawing my attention. I hesitated, my hand on the knob. Something about it felt wrong, like crossing a line I shouldn't. But I had to know. I pulled it open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, more clothes hung neatly, their hangers spaced evenly. Shoes were lined up on the floor, polished and untouched. A small trunk sat in the corner, its lid closed with a rusted lock. I closed the closet door, my breath coming in short, shaky gasps. This room was a lie, a fabrication of a life we never lived. But the photograph, the clothes, the train, it all felt so real. I turned to Daniel, who stood frozen near the doorway, his eyes wide with fear. "We need to leave," I said, my voice firm. "No." He nodded, taking a step back. But as he turned, he paused. "Wait," he said, his voice barely audible. "Look at that." I followed his gaze to the wall near the bed. Scrawled in faint pencil letters was a name, Elijah. Below it, a date, 2005. I stared at it, my mind blank. Elijah? I didn't recognize the name, yet it felt familiar, like something just out of reach. Suddenly the lights flickered, dimming for a moment before brightening again. The room seemed to shift around me, the walls closing in. I could feel a presence, unseen but undeniable, watching me. My skin crawled as I whispered, "We need to get out of here. Now." Daniel didn't argue. Together we stepped out of the room, closing the door behind us. But as I turned the doorknob, I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper, a soft, childlike voice. "Don't forget me." I froze, my heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel shook his head, his eyes wide. "Hear what?" I sighed, pushing the thought aside. It was just my imagination, playing tricks on me. But as I walked away from the door, the whisper echoed in my mind. Persistent, insistent. "Don't forget me." I knew then that this was just the beginning. The forgotten room had secrets, and it was determined to make sure I remembered them. Scratching in the walls, the house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboard. I had just settled into bed, the weight of the day pressing heavily on my mind. The dim moonlight streaming through the window cast long shadows, making the room feel larger than it was. I closed my eyes, hoping for a restful night, but it wasn't long before the familiar, yet unwelcome sound began again. Scratch, scratch, chasing. At first it was faint, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder, more insistent. I sat up, my heart pounding, and listened intently. The sounds seemed to come from within the walls, rhythmic and deliberate, like something was clawing its way through the plaster. My breath caught in my throat as I threw off the covers and stepped into the cold night air. "Daniel?" I called out softly, but there was no response. The house was still, except for the persistent scratching. I moved towards the hallway, my bare feet making soft slapping sounds against the floor. The scratching grew louder and I could feel the vibrations through the walls. As I reached the top of the stairs, I noticed something unusual. The air seemed heavier, thick with an almost palpable tension. The scratching was now accompanied by faint whispers, soft and indistinct, but they sent a chill down my spine. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to investigate further. The attic had always been a place of mystery, a space filled with forgotten memories and dusty relics. I fumbled for the flashlight on my phone and made my way up the creaky ladder. The air in the attic was stale, filled with the scent of old books and decay. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the faint sound of a spider crawling across the floor added to the eerie atmosphere. I shone my light around the space, the beam landing on an old trunk in the corner. It was locked, but I could see the outline of something beneath it. I moved closer, my curiosity piqued. As I lifted the edge of the trunk, a piece of paper slipped out and fell to the floor. Bending down to pick it up, I realized it was a page from a notebook. The handwriting was familiar, yet strange. It was mine, but the name at the top of the page was not. Elijah Carter, it read. I frowned, confusion washing over me. The name was close to my own, but not quite right. I looked around the attic again, this time noticing a pile of old school books stacked in the corner. I approached them hesitantly, the scratching in the walls seeming to grow more frantic with each step. As I flipped through the books, I saw that each one had my handwriting, but the name inside was always Elijah Carter. A cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. Who was Elijah Carter? And why did his name appear in books that I could have sworn were mine? The whispers in the walls seemed to grow louder, more urgent, as if trying to tell me something I couldn't quite understand. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. The silence was oppressive, more frightening than the noise had been. I stood there, frozen, as the weight of the mystery pressed down on me. The name Elijah Carter echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of something I couldn't quite grasp. I knew then that I had to confront the truth, no matter how unsettling it might be. The house held secrets that I was beginning to uncover. And with each step, the line between reality and illusion grew thinner until I couldn't tell what was real and what was just a product of my own fevered imagination. The scratching in the walls had started as a simple noise, but it had led me to a discovery that would change everything. And as I stood there in the dim light of the attic, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were following my every move. I took a deep breath and made my way back down to my room, the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on my mind. The house was quiet once more, but I knew that the scratching would return, and with it, more questions than I was ready to answer. Daniel's breakdown. The house creaked and groaned at night, the old wooden beams shifting as if they too were restless. I lay in bed, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, my mind racing. It had been weeks since I returned home, and the strange occurrences only seemed to worsen. The scratching in the walls had grown louder, the whispers more insistent, and then there was the door that shouldn't exist. It loomed at the end of the hallway, a constant reminder that something was terribly wrong. Daniel had been unraveling faster than I could keep up with. His paranoia had started with small things. Misplaced keys, a door left slightly ajar, the faint sound of footsteps upstairs when no one was there. But now, it was more than that. He was convinced that our family had once had 3 children, not 2. He spoke of a brother, a boy with a face just like mine who had vanished without a trace. At first I dismissed it as delusions brought on by stress and the eerie atmosphere of the house. But then I started to notice things too. A faint memory here, a displaced object there. It was as if the house itself were shifting, rewriting its history and ours in real time. One night, Daniel burst into my room, his eyes wide and frantic. He clutched a dusty VHS tape in his trembling hands. "Summer, all 3 of us," it read in faded marker. He didn't say a word, just turned and ran downstairs, the tape clutched tightly in his fist. I followed him reluctantly, my stomach twisting with a sense of dread. The living room was dim, the only light coming from the flickering TV as Daniel shoved the tape into the VCR. The screen buzzed with static, and for a moment, I thought it wouldn't play. But then, like magic, an image appeared. The video showed our parents, younger and smiling, standing in the backyard. Daniel and I were there, laughing, chasing each other around the old oak tree. But then, there was someone else. A boy about my age, with the same eyes, the same messy brown hair. He was standing just behind us, his smile faint, almost hesitant. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't remember him, but as I watched, something strange happened. A memory flickered to life in my mind, as vivid as the video playing before me. I remembered that boy. I remembered playing with him, fighting with him, sharing secrets in the dead of night. I remembered a name, Ethan. But I didn't remember any of it. The screen flickered, the image distorting as if something had reached out and smudged it away. When it cleared, the boy was gone. The video continued as if he had never been there at all. Daniel turned to me, his face pale. "You see him, don't you?" he whispered. "You remember?" I wanted to deny it, to tell him it was just the Mandela effect, a trick of the mind. But I couldn't. The memories were there, buried deep but undeniable. I had a brother. His name was Ethan, and he was gone. The TV screen went black and the room fell silent. Daniel was shaking, his eyes brimming with tears. "Where did he go?" he muttered over and over. "Where did he go?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the house seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows in the room seemed to twist and writhe like living things. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from upstairs. Daniel froze, his breath catching. "What was that?" he whispered. I shook my head. "I don't know." We sat there for a long moment, the silence oppressive. Then, without a word, Daniel stood and walked out of the room. I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest. The stairs creaked under our feet as we climbed, the sound echoing through the empty house. When we reached the top of the stairs, Daniel stopped. The door at the end of the hallway, the one that shouldn't exist, was slightly ajar. He turned to me, his eyes wide with fear. "It's open," he whispered. "It's been open all along." I wanted to run, to turn around and never look back, but I couldn't. Something inside me, something primal and insistent, urged me forward. I pushed the door open, and a cold draft of air swept past me, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. The room beyond the door was small, the walls lined with old peeling wallpaper. A single bed stood in the center of the room, its quilt worn and faded. On the nightstand, a framed photograph sat, its glass cracked and cloudy. I picked it up, my heart racing, and wiped away the dust. The photograph showed our family, Mom, Dad, Daniel, and me, and Ethan. He was standing just behind us, his smile faint, almost hesitant. I stared at his face, trying to place him, trying to remember. But the memories came and went, flickering like the screen of the old TV. Daniel stood in the doorway, his voice barely audible. "Do you remember him now?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure. The memories were there, but they felt off, as if they belonged to someone else. Suddenly, a faint whisper echoed through the room. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill down my spine. "Ethan," it seemed to say. "Ethan." Daniel grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, until it was almost a scream. The air in the room seemed to vibrate with it, the walls trembling as if they were alive. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The room fell silent, the stillness oppressive. I let out a shaky breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "We need to get out of here," I said, turning toward the door. But Daniel didn't move. He was staring at something across the room, his eyes wide with fear. I followed his gaze, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The bed in the center of the room was no longer empty. A figure lay on it, shrouded in shadows. It was still, unmoving, but I could sense its presence, heavy and oppressive. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. "Who's there?" Daniel called out, his voice trembling. There was no answer. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. But I knew it was there, watching us, waiting for us. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. I heard Daniel's sharp intake of breath, and then his footsteps as he turned and ran. I followed him, my heart racing, the darkness closing in around me. We didn't stop until we were back in the living room, the TV still flickering with static. Daniel collapsed onto the couch, his face pale and sweaty. I sat down beside him, my mind racing. "What just happened?" I asked, my voice shaking. Daniel didn't answer. He just shook his head, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," he muttered, "but something's wrong. Something's really wrong." I nodded, though I didn't know what to say. The house seemed to be shifting, changing, rewriting its history, and ours with every passing moment. And I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. As I sat there, the TV screen flickered back to life. The static cleared, and for a moment I saw the face of the boy from the photograph, Ethan. His eyes were wide with fear, and his mouth was open as if he were trying to scream. But no sound came out. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the image was gone. The screen went black and the room fell silent once more. But I knew the truth now. Ethan wasn't just a memory. He was real, and whatever had taken him was still out there waiting. The one who was erased. The night crept in like a thief, stealing the last remnants of daylight and leaving only shadows. I lay in bed, the creaks of the old house sounding like whispers in the dark. It had been days since I found the forgotten room, yet the house still felt like a living, breathing entity, watching me with cold, dead eyes. My mind was a battlefield. Memories, both familiar and foreign, clashed in my thoughts. I remembered running through the backyard as a child, Daniel by my side. But then, a new memory surfaced, playing catch with a boy who looked just like me, yet wasn't me. His laughter echoed in my mind, a sound I couldn't place. Was it real, or was my mind playing tricks? The house shifted. Walls that were once straight now seemed to lean as if they were trying to listen. I could swear when I heard footsteps in the hallway, light and cautious, as if someone was trying not to be seen. My heart raced, pounding against my chest like a drum. I called out, "Daniel?" The only response was silence. I threw off the covers and stepped into the hallway. The air was thick with the scent of decay. The walls seemed to hum, a low, ominous vibration. I walked to the bathroom, flipping on the light, and stared at my reflection. My face stared back, but something was off. My eyes, usually a deep brown, now seemed a shade lighter. I blinked, and for a moment they were brown again. I turned away, telling myself it was just a trick of the light, but the feeling lingered. Every time I looked away, I felt a change. My reflection rippled like water disturbed by a stone. I could have sworn I saw a shadow behind me, a figure that wasn't there. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. The house groaned. The sound was familiar, yet different. It sounded like it was in pain. I walked back to my room, my bare feet making soft slapping sounds on the floor. As I passed by Daniel's room, I heard a whimper. I pushed open the door. He was sitting on his bed, his face pale. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting down beside him. "I saw him," he whispered. "I saw the other US." I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Daniel's eyes were wide. "I saw us playing. There were three of us. Me, you, and him." The air seemed to thicken. I felt a presence in the room, like someone was watching us. "Who is he?" I asked, though I already knew. Daniel shook his head. "I don't know, but he's been erased. The house doesn't remember him, but I do." I wanted to tell him he was crazy, that it was all in his head. But the memories were there, lurking just beneath the surface. They felt real. They felt true. I stood up. "Let's go to the forgotten room." Daniel nodded. We walked silently, the house shifting around us. The forgotten room was at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and a cold breeze hit me. Inside, the room was exactly as we had found it. The bed, the quilt, the train set. I picked up the photograph. The boy in the picture looked like me, yet he wasn't me. His smile was different, his eyes a shade lighter. I felt a pang of jealousy, of anger. Who was this boy? Why was he here? The train set started to move, the wheels clicking on the tracks. It was a soft, rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat. I stared at it, transfixed. The boy in the picture was playing with the train set, his laughter echoing in my mind. I placed the photograph back on the nightstand. The train set stopped. The room fell silent. I heard a voice. It was soft, barely audible. "Find me." I looked at Daniel. He didn't seem to hear it. "Did you hear that?" I asked. He shook his head. "Hear what?" I didn't answer. The voice came again, a little louder. "Find me." I felt a pull, a compulsion to move. I walked to the closet, pushing it open. Inside, I found a box of toys. A ball, a book, a stuffed animal. They felt familiar, yet they belonged to someone else. The voice grew louder. "Find me." I closed the closet door. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in. I could feel the boy's presence, his eyes on me. I turned to Daniel. "We need to leave." He nodded. We walked back to our rooms, the house shifting around us. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the boy was waiting for me. As I lay in bed, the house creaked and groaned. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep. The boy's face kept appearing in my mind, his smile, his laughter. He was real. He had to be. I threw off the covers and got out of bed. The hallway was dark, the air thick with the scent of decay. I walked back to the forgotten room, pushing open the door. The room was empty. The bed was made, the quilt smooth. The train set was still. I walked to the nightstand, picking up the photograph. The boy smiled at me, his eyes pleading. "Find me," he whispered. I looked around the room, but I was alone. The house shifted, the walls pressing in. I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate. They came from the closet. I walked to the closet, pushing open the door. Inside, I found a stack of boxes. I pulled them out one by one. The first was empty. The second was filled with clothes. The third was filled with toys. At the bottom of the closet, I found a shoebox. Inside, there was a photograph. It was the same family picture, but different. The boy was in the center, his arms around me and Daniel. My parents smiled, their faces full of joy. I heard a sound behind me. I turned. The boy stood in the doorway, his eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he said. I tried to speak, but I couldn't. The boy reached out, his hand touching mine. The room spun, the walls blurring. I fell to the ground, the photograph slipping from my fingers. When I came to, I was lying in bed. The room was quiet. The house was still. I looked at the clock. It was morning. I got out of bed, walking to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back, unchanged. I turned away, feeling a sense of relief. But then I heard it, a whisper. "I remember you." I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. I walked back to my room, locking the door. The house was quiet, the walls straight. The forgotten room was gone, but the memory remained. The boy was real. He was erased, but he was real, and he was waiting. Mother's confession. The dim light of the bedside lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the walls of my mother's bedroom. The air was thick with the scent of old books and stale air, a smell that seemed to cling to every corner of the house like a bad omen. My mother lay in bed, her frail frame barely visible under the heavy blankets. Her eyes, once sharp and full of life, now seemed sunken and distant, as if staring through me into some unseen world. Daniel sat in the corner of the room, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His eyes darted between me and our mother, his expression a mix of fear and determination. The ticking of the clock on the wall echoed through the room, a steady rhythm that seemed to grow louder with each passing moment. "Mom," I began, my voice low and cautious. "We need to talk about what's going on. About the door. About everything." She shifted slightly, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the blanket. "I don't know what you're talking about," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't lie to us," Daniel said abruptly, his voice sharp with frustration. "We've seen the door, we've seen the room, and we found the photograph. Who is that boy?" My mother's eyes flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw a glimmer of recognition. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She looked away, her gaze falling on some invisible point beyond the window. He's your brother," she whispered finally, her voice cracking. I froze. "What are you talking about? We don't have another brother." "Thomas," she said, the name escaping her lips like a breath of relief. His name was Thomas. I felt a chill running down my spine. "Thomas? But I don't remember Thomas." "Do you?" I turned to Daniel, who shook his head, his eyes wide with confusion. "He was real," my mother continued, her voice trembling. "He was real, and he was taken. Something took him." "Taken," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean, something took him?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled herself up, her hands shaking as she reached for a small, leather-bound box on the nightstand. She fumbled with the latch, her fingers clumsy before finally opening it. Inside were a few photographs, yellowed with age. She handed one to me. The photograph was old, the edges worn and frayed. It showed our family, my parents, Daniel, and a boy I had never seen before. He was about my age in the picture, with the same eyes and the same crooked smile. But it wasn't me. It was someone else. Someone who looked just like me. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who is this?" "That's Thomas," my mother said, her eyes filling with tears. "He was your twin. You two were born on the same day, in the same hospital. But he was taken. Something came and took him." I stared at the photograph, my mind racing. A twin brother? I had no memory of that. None of this made sense. "When?" Daniel asked, his voice soft but urgent. "When was he taken?" My mother's lips trembled. "It was when you were children. You were only 5 years old, Thomas. He was playing in the backyard and then he was gone. We searched for him, but he was just gone. No trace, nothing. It was as if he never existed. But he did exist," Daniel said, his voice firm. "I remember him. I remember playing with him, don't I?" He looked at me, his eyes searching for confirmation. I shook my head. "I don't remember anything about him." "You wouldn't," my mother said, her voice heavy with sorrow. You were different after that. Both of you. You stopped talking about him, stopped asking for him. It was as if you forgot." "Forgot," I repeated, my voice rising. "How could we just forget our own brother?" "It wasn't your fault," my mother said, her voice breaking. Something took him, and it took the memories too. It erased him from our lives, from our minds. Even me, I tried to hold on, but it was too hard. I started to forget too. I felt a cold dread creeping up my spine. What are you saying? That something supernatural took him? My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what it was, but it was real, and it's coming back. It's coming back, and I can't stop it. As she spoke, the room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deepening and twisting around us. The ticking of the clock sounded louder now, more insistent, as if counting down to something. Suddenly, a low creak echoed through the house, the sound of wood shifting and groaning. My mother's eyes snapped to the door, her face pale. "What was that?" Daniel asked, his voice tight with fear. I tried to reassure him. "It's just the house settling. Old houses do that." But my mother didn't seem convinced. She pulled the blanket tighter around her, her hands shaking. "It's here," she whispered. "It's coming back." As if on cue, a faint scratching sound began to echo through the walls, soft but persistent. It was the same sound I had heard before, the same sound that had kept me up at night. My heart raced as I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, and with it came a low, almost imperceptible hum. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate through the air, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. My mother's eyes were wide with fear, and Daniel's face was pale. "What is that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have an answer. The scratching stopped abruptly, leaving an uncomfortable silence in its wake, but the hum remained, low and steady, like a heartbeat. It was then that I noticed the cold spot in the room, a patch of air that felt icy to the touch. I could see my breath as I exhaled, and I knew that something was wrong. My mother's eyes were fixed on something across the room, something I couldn't see. "It's here," she said again, her voice barely audible. And then, everything went black. When the lights flickered back on, my mother was lying back in bed, her eyes closed as if she had never moved. Daniel and I exchanged a nervous glance, both of us breathing heavily. But the confession had already been made. The truth was out, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The night of the unraveling, the house was quiet, too quiet. I lay in bed, listening to the emptiness. No creaks, no groans, no distant hum of traffic outside. Just silence. It felt oppressive, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I tried to convince myself it was just the usual stillness of the night, but I knew better. Something was wrong. I sat up, running a hand through my tangled hair. The clock on the nightstand read 2:47 a.m. I hadn't been asleep long. The memory of Daniel's pale face and trembling hands flashed in my mind. He had been acting strange all evening, pacing back and forth in his room, muttering something about, "It is coming back." I tried to talk to him, to calm him down, but he wouldn't let me in. He just kept saying, "It's here, it's inside the walls." I threw off the covers and stepped onto the cold floor. The wooden boards creaked under my feet, breaking the silence. I froze, holding my breath. Nothing. No response. No sound of Daniel stirring in his room or my mother shifting in hers. I pulled on a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie, then slipped out into the hallway. The house felt colder than it should be. The air was thick, almost heavy, like breathing through a damp cloth. I walked past my mother's room, hesitating for a moment. Her door was slightly ajar, and I could hear the faint sound of her breathing. It was slow, steady, but there was something unsettling about it. She wasn't restless or tossing and turning. She was still, too still. I pushed the door open a little wider, peeking inside. She lay on her back, her hands folded over her chest. Her face was calm, almost peaceful, but her eyes weren't closed. They were open, staring at the ceiling. "Mom?" I whispered, stepping inside. She didn't respond. I approached her bed, reaching out to shake her gently. "Mom, are you okay?" She didn't move. Her eyes didn't blink. I frowned, feeling a chill run down my spine. I turned to leave, then stopped. Something about her expression bothered me. It wasn't just the openness of her eyes. It was the way she was staring, as if she could see something I couldn't. Something in the room with her. I left her room, closing the door behind me. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dark and shadowy. The only light came from the sliver of moon peeking through the window at the end of the hall. I walked toward it, my bare feet making soft slapping sounds against the floor. Halfway down the hall, I stopped. The door to the forgotten room was open. Wide open. It creaked gently, as if pushed by an invisible hand. My heart raced, pounding in my ears. I hadn't seen the door open before. Not like this. It was pitch black inside, a void that seemed to pull the light out of the hallway. I stood there, frozen, my breath catching in my throat. "Daniel," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you in there?" No answer, just the creaking of the door. I took a step back, then another, my legs trembling. I didn't want to go in there. I didn't want to see what was inside. But something compelled me. A pull, a force, a voice in my head that wasn't my own, urging me to step through the doorway. I turned and ran back to my room, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against it, my heart racing. I couldn't go in there. I couldn't face whatever was inside. But as I stood there, I heard it. A sound. A low, guttural whisper. It was soft at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder, more insistent. It was calling my name. "Open the door," it said. "Step inside." I squeezed my eyes shut, clenching my fists. "No," I muttered. "I won't do it. I won't go in there." But then I heard another sound. A faint scratching noise, like fingernails on wood. It came from inside my room. I turned, my eyes scanning the space. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. It was coming from the walls. I pressed my hands against my ears, trying to block it out. But I could still hear it. It was inside my head now, echoing through my mind. The scratching, the whispering, the creaking of the door. It was all happening inside me, around me, closing in on me. I couldn't take it anymore. I threw open my door and ran down the hallway toward the forgotten room. The scratching and whispering grew louder, more intense. The air seemed to thicken, becoming harder to breathe. I reached the doorway and hesitated for just a moment before stepping inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, everything changed. The world around me shifted, warped. The floor beneath my feet bent and twisted, like melting wax. The walls seemed to pulse, alive, breathing. The air was thick with a sickly sweet scent, like rotting flowers. I stumbled forward, my hands out in front of me. The darkness was absolute, a living, breathing entity that wrapped itself around me. I couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything. There was only the sensation of falling, of slipping, of unraveling. And then, the memories came. Not my memories. Not Daniel's. But someone else. A boy's. A boy who looked just like me. He was younger, standing in this very room, playing with a toy train set that circled endlessly. He was laughing, happy. But as the memory played on, the laughter turned to tears. The boy was scared, hiding under the bed. The walls were closing in on him. The whispers were calling his name. I tried to pull away, to break free from the memory, but it held me tight. It was real. It was happening. The boy was real, and I was him. I was him, trapped in this room, being erased, being forgotten. I screamed. I screamed and screamed, but no sound came out. The world around me began to distort, to break apart. The walls cracked, the floor splintered, the air shattered. I was falling, spiraling down into a void, a memory that never was. And then, everything stopped. The world snapped back into place. I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing, my body numb. The room was silent. The door was closed. I was alone. But something was different. Something inside me was different. I could feel it. A memory. A piece of me that wasn't mine. A boy. A brother. A life that never happened. I pushed myself up, my hands shaking. I had to get out of there. I had to find Daniel. I had to make sense of this. But as I turned to leave, I saw something on the floor. A photograph. It was the same family picture I had seen before. My parents, Daniel Doctor, and the boy. But now the boy's face was gone. Erased. Scratched out with a knife. I picked it up, staring at the jagged lines. The scratching sound echoed in my mind. I felt a cold, clammy hand on the back of my neck. I spun around, but there was no one there. The floor creaked beneath me. The walls seemed to shift, and I knew I wasn't alone. The other side, as I stepped through the forgotten room's doorway, the world around me dissolved, like paint bleeding in the rain. The air grew thick with the scent of decay, and a chill settled over me, seeping into my bones. The house on the other side was a twisted mirror of my childhood home. Its walls cracked and peeling, the floors creaking underfoot. Shadows stretched like grasping fingers, and the silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the faint creaks and groans of the house settling, or perhaps something else. I wandered through the rooms, each step echoing in the hollow space. Family photographs hung on the walls, their glass cracked and cloudy. In each frame, my face was replaced by a stranger, someone with familiar eyes, but a smile I didn't recognize. The images flickered faintly like candles in the wind, and I could have sworn I heard whispers, soft and indistinct as I passed. In the living room, I found a photograph of my family. My parents stood stiffly, their faces unreadable. Beside them, I saw myself, or someone who looked just like me. And next to me, a brother I had never known. His eyes, though, they lingered in my mind, like a memory trying to surface. The air seemed to vibrate with tension, and I felt a presence around me, unseen but palpable. Every step I took, every breath I made, felt like an intrusion. I wasn't alone here. I knew it. I felt it. Then, I heard my name, whispered. It was a voice I didn't recognize, yet it sent a shiver down my spine. I turned, but there was no one there. The house seemed to shift around me, the wall slanting slightly, the floor tilting. My head spun, and I steadied myself against the wall, the plaster crumbling under my hand. In the hallway, I saw him. The forgotten brother Darcel. He stood in the shadows, his face obscured, his presence both familiar and strange. My heart raced as he stepped forward, his features becoming clearer. He looked like me, yet different. His expression was a mix of sadness and longing. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, his hand brushing against mine. His touch was cold, and I jerked back, my mind reeling. Suddenly, memories flooded me, memories that weren't mine. Playing in this house, laughing with this brother, sharing secrets. But these memories were fractured, distorted, as if they belonged to someone else. I clenched my fists, trying to shake the images, but they lingered, confusing me. The house seemed to close around me, the walls pressing in. I heard voices, faint but growing louder, my parents calling my name, their voices distorted. I turned, trying to find the source, but they seemed to come from all directions. The forgotten brother moved closer, his eyes pleading. "Remember me," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I wanted to understand, but my mind fought it. as if remembering him would unravel everything. The world around me began to warp, colors bleeding, sounds twisting. I felt myself slipping, my grip on reality tenuous. The forgotten brother reached out again, and this time, I didn't pull away. His hand grasped mine, cold and firm, and I felt a surge of memories, of a life we had shared, of moments I had never known. But with each memory, the world around me decayed further. The house crumbled, the walls disintegrating into dust. The forgotten brother's grip tightened, his eyes filled with desperation. "Don't forget," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "Please, don't forget." I wanted to promise, I wanted to hold on, but the memories were fading, slipping away like sand in my hands. The forgotten brother's face blurred, his form dissolving into the shadows. I reached out, trying to hold him, but he was gone. The house fell silent, the darkness receding. I stood alone, the memories almost gone, but the ache of loss remained. I knew I had to leave, to find a way back home. As I turned to go, I heard a sound, a faint whisper in my ear. "I remember you." I spun around, but there was no one there. The house was empty, the photographs gone, the walls bare. I took a deep breath and stepped back through the doorway, leaving the other side behind. But the whisper lingered, echoing in my mind, a reminder of what I had seen and what I had forgotten. The price of remembering. The air inside the forgotten room clung to me like a damp shroud, heavy and suffocating. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, their voices weaving together in a chilling chorus. "Choose the Tantar. Stay or forget." The words echoed in my mind, relentless and haunting. I stood at the edge of the room, my feet rooted to the floor, as the walls seemed to press in around me. The floor beneath me felt soft, like it might give way at any moment, swallowing me whole. And then, I saw him. He was standing in the corner of the room, shrouded in shadow. His face was familiar, so familiar it hurt. It was my face, yet not my face. His eyes were darker, his expression somber, as if he had carried the weight of the world on his shoulders for far too long. He didn't move or speak, but I felt his presence like a cold wind pressing against my skin. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. Instead, he took a step forward, and the shadows around him seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he were afraid of startling me. But I wasn't afraid. Not yet. I was curious, despite the dread curling in my stomach. "You're the one they forgot," I said, the realization dawning on me. "You're the brother I never knew." He nodded, just once. His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a jolt of recognition, as if I were staring into a mirror. But it wasn't just his face that was similar. It was the way he stood, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the way his lips curved slightly downward as if he were always on the verge of a frown. It was all so familiar. "Do you remember me?" he asked, his voice low and rough, like it hadn't been used in years. I hesitated. I wanted to say yes, to tell him I remembered, but the truth was, I didn't. Not really. The memories I had were fragmented, fleeting, images of a childhood that wasn't mine, of a brother I had never known. But as I stood there looking at him, something shifted inside me. A door in my mind creaked open, and memories spilled out, vivid and alive. I remembered playing with him in the backyard, chasing each other through the sprinklers on a hot summer day. I remembered the way he laughed, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. I remembered the way he used to sit beside me at the dinner table, stealing bits of food from my plate when no one was looking. And I remembered the way he used to hold my hand when we were scared, his fingers small but steady in mine. But as the memories flooded my mind, the room around me began to change. The walls started to shift and ripple, like the surface of a pond. The air grew colder, the shadows deepening into dark, twisting shapes that seemed to move of their own accord. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, and I felt a strange tingling sensation in my head, as if my mind were unraveling thread by thread. He took another step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "They tried to forget me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They wanted to erase me, to make it like I never existed. But I'm still here. I've always been here." "Why?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why would they forget you?" He shook his head. "I don't know. I don't remember. All I know is that something took me. Something that didn't want me here. And when it took me, it erased me from their memories, from the house itself. But I didn't go. I stayed here, trapped in this room, waiting for someone to remember." The words sent a chill down my spine. Trapped. Waiting. Forgotten. "And now?" I asked, my throat tight. He took another step closer, and the room seemed to shrink around us. The shadows pressed in, the air growing thick and heavy. I could feel his breath on my skin, cold and sharp like a winter wind. "Now you have to choose," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You can stay here with me, remember me, and let the house forget you. Or you can leave, forget me, and go back to your life. But if you leave, you'll never remember me again. You'll never know I existed." I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of the choice was crushing me, pressing down on me like a physical force. On one hand, I had my life, my family, my future. On the other hand, I had him, this brother I never knew, this piece of my past that I'd never even realized was missing. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something there, something that made my decision for me. I saw loneliness, deep and profound, the kind of loneliness that comes from being forgotten, from being erased. I saw pain, sharp and raw, the kind of pain that comes from being left behind. And I saw hope, faint but stubborn, the kind of hope that comes from believing that someday someone would remember. "I can't leave you here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled just a little, and for a moment the room seemed to fade away. The shadows receded, the air warmed, and the whispers fell silent. For a moment everything felt right, but then the moment passed. The room snapped back into focus, the shadows surging forward like a wave. The whispers screamed in my ears, a deafening cacophony that made my head spin, and the floor beneath me gave way, sending me tumbling forward into darkness. When I woke up, I was lying in my bed, the morning sunlight streaming through the window. The house was quiet, still, as if nothing had ever happened. I sat up, rubbing my head, trying to shake the lingering fog from my mind. And then I remembered, or almost remembered. There was something there, just out of reach, a shadow in the corner of my mind. A name, a face, a memory that felt real but wasn't quite. I frowned, trying to grab hold of it, but it slipped away, leaving me with nothing but a faint sense of loss. I got out of bed, my movements slow and deliberate. The house felt right. The layout was familiar, the rooms exactly as they should be. The forgotten room was gone, as if it had never existed. But as I walked downstairs, I noticed something strange. On the wall, near the bottom of the stairs, there was a photograph I had never seen before. It was old, the edges faded and worn, but the image was clear enough. It showed a family, my family, smiling and happy. My parents, Daniel, and me. And then there was another boy, standing just behind us, his face blurred and indistinct as if he'd been erased from the picture. I stared at it, my heart pounding, and then I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible, but clear enough. "I remember you." I turned, but there was no one there. And then everything went black. The Forgotten One is watching. I never believed in the Mandela effect. To me, it was just a fancy term for misremembered details, collective false memories, and overactive imaginations. People talked about it like it was some kind of supernatural phenomenon, but I laughed it off. That was before I found the room. The room was never there. It started when I returned to my childhood home. My mother had fallen ill, and my younger brother, Daniel, refused to stay in the house alone. "Something is wrong here," he said. The house changed. At first I dismissed it, but the night I heard the scratching inside the walls, the whispers repeating my name, something shifted. The layout of the house no longer felt right. Then one night, Daniel screamed. I found him standing in the hallway, his face pale. "It is back," he whispered. The door at the end of the hallway, the one that should not exist. I had no memory of that door. Neither did my mother, but Daniel did. And the worst part? He remembered what was inside. The door creaked open with a sound like creesh, its hinges groaning as if they hadn't been used in years. On the other side was a forgotten room, filled with objects from the past that never happened. A bed with a worn-out quilt, a child's drawing on the wall, a toy train set circling endlessly, yet we had never owned one. And then I saw the photograph on the nightstand, a family picture. My parents, Daniel ... and a boy I had never seen before. A boy whose face looked just like mine. The air in the room was thick, heavy with dust and something else. Something metallic, like the scent of old blood. My mind raced. Who was this boy? And why did I feel a connection to him? Daniel's voice came from behind me, trembling. His name was Jacob. I turned to him. "Who told you that?" He shook his head. I remember him. I didn't. And that disturbed me more than anything. As the days passed, the house seemed to change around us. Doors shifted. Walls whispered. My mother's condition worsened. She began calling me by another name, Ethan, a name I had never heard before. And then I found the school books in the attic. Each one had my handwriting inside, but the name written in them wasn't mine. It was Ethan's. Something was wrong. The house had a memory of its own, and it was infecting us. One night, Daniel found a home video labeled Summer, all three of us. The tape was old, the label faded, but when we played it, the screen flickered and distorted. And suddenly, I remembered. A boy with my face, laughing, playing, running through the backyard with Daniel. A brother I had never known. The memories were fragmented, like pieces of a shattered mirror. But they were there, and they felt real. The night of the unraveling came when I woke up to find Daniel missing. The forgotten room's door was wide open, pitch black beyond its frame. I stepped inside, and the whispers became screams. The floor bent beneath me, and I felt myself slipping into a memory that never was. On the other hand, I found myself in a world that was almost my own, but not quite. A version of my house, rotting and empty. Family photographs where my face had been replaced by someone else. And then I saw him, the forgotten brother, waiting in the darkness. He looked just like me, but he wasn't me. And when he spoke, his voice echoed in my mind. I remember you. The protagonist realized the truth. Remembering him came at a cost. The house itself wanted to forget. If they tried to bring him back, they risked taking his place. The whispers turned into pleading voices. Choose. Stay or forget. The protagonist made their choice. The next morning, they woke up in a house that felt right. But something was missing. Something they could almost remember. Almost. As they left the house, believing they had escaped, they heard something inside whisper their name. In the reflection of a window, there was a shadow standing behind them. The story ended with the words, I remember you. And in that moment, the line between memory and reality blurred forever. The Whispering Pines. Let me spin you a tale of the Whispering Pines, where secrets lurk beneath the shadows of ancient trees. In the heart of northern Michigan's dense forests lies Pine Hollow, a ghost town with a dark past. Whispers of old legends cling to the air like morning mist. It's here that the Carter family, Maya, her little brother Jake, and their long-absent father Clayton, inherit a lonely cabin from a relative they barely knew. They saw it as a chance to mend their broken bonds. Little did they know they were stepping into a nightmare. From the moment they arrived, something felt off. Maya couldn't shake the chill that crept up her spine when she spotted those eerie carvings on the trees, faces frozen in silent screams. Jake tried to laugh it off, but even his jokes fell flat in the heavy silence of the woods. That first night, Maya heard it. Soft whispers seeping through the walls, like secrets trying to escape. When she ventured outside, tiny footprints led into the darkness, as if a child had wandered off. But they were alone out here, weren't they? An old journal revealed the ugly truth. Greedy loggers had ignored warnings, chopping down trees sacred to the local tribes. They awakened something ancient and angry. The last entry sent shivers down Maya's spine. They're watching us. They know what we've done. Strange things kept happening. Jake's wildlife photos showed shadowy figures lurking just out of focus. Their dad, Clayton, started mumbling to himself, apologizing to thin air. Even Cole, their usually chill cat, hissed at empty corners and clawed at the door like he was trying to escape. Maya dug deeper and uncovered a shocking connection. Clayton had worked these same woods as a young man, helping to fell those forbidden trees. His guilt was eating him alive, quite literally. Dark vines spread across his skin like roots burrowing deep. Jake withdrew into himself, vanishing into the forest for hours. One night he stumbled back, covered in dirt and wild-eyed, babbling about a ghostly girl in white who'd led him deeper and deeper and deeper before vanishing into thin air. The whispers grew louder, chanting in forgotten tongues. Maya's own reflection betrayed her, sometimes showing a terrified stranger staring back. Objects moved on their own, chairs toppling, spoons clattering to the floor when no one was near. Desperate, Maya sought help from a local woman rumored to know old magic. The solution was grim. Only a willing sacrifice could appease the angry spirits. As Maya grappled with an impossible choice, she learned the horrifying truth. Years ago, Clayton had made a devil's bargain to protect his family, tying their fates to the cursed forest. Now, payment was due. In a final, heart-pounding showdown, Maya followed the whispers to a clearing filled with gnarled stumps. At its center stood a massive tree, its trunk pulsing with an otherworldly life. Too late, she realized the spirits were using her family to regain their lost power. With a cry of anguish, Maya plunged a ceremonial dagger into the tree's heart. The forest shuddered and howled as Clayton collapsed, freed but forever scarred by what he'd done. Months later, Jake lived alone in the cabin, haunted by his sister's sacrifice. Cole kept silent vigil by the window, his eyes fixed on the tree line. One night, a low growl echoed from the attic. Jake crept up to investigate and found a single fresh carving on the wall, oozing sap like blood. The forest, it seemed, hadn't finished with them yet. Welcome to Pine Hollow. The trees never forget, they say. The Carter family's journey to their inherited cabin was long and boring, but things got weird as soon as they turned onto that narrow, dirty road. The trees closed in, blocking out the sun and making everything look kinda green and spooky. Maya rolled down her window, hoping for some fresh air, but all she got was the smell of wet dirt and rotting leaves. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath, watching them. When they finally got to the cabin, it was this sad old thing with gray wood siding and a porch that looked ready to collapse. Jake hopped out of the car first, stretching like a cat. "Well, this place is straight out of a horror movie," he said with a nervous laugh. Maya didn't say anything. She was too busy staring at the trees. Someone had carved these creepy faces into the bark, not just random scratches, but actual faces with wide-open mouths like they were screaming. It made her stomach do a little flip. "Hey, what do you think these are?" she asked, running her fingers over one of the carvings. Clayton, who'd been weirdly quiet the whole trip, just shrugged. "Probably just some kids messing around," he mumbled, but he didn't sound too sure. He kept fiddling with his toolbox strap, which was his tell when he was nervous. Inside, the cabin was cold and smelled musty, even though it was summer outside. Dust was everywhere, and there were cobwebs in every corner. Jake went off to explore, whistling some annoying tune, while Clayton started poking at the plumbing under the sink. Maya just stood by the door, staring out at the woods. The trees seemed to press in close, like they were trying to peek inside. That night, they all sat in the tiny living room, eating pizza and not really talking much. Their cat, Cole, kept prowling around, bumping into their legs. Everyone seemed on edge, like they were waiting for something to happen. "I'm gonna hit the sack," Jake said suddenly, standing up. "This place is giving me the creeps." "It's just an old house," Clayton grumbled, but his knuckles were white from gripping his coffee mug so hard. Maya didn't say anything. She couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Every time she looked out the window, the shadows seemed to move, like the forest was alive and watching them. Later that night, when everyone else was asleep, Maya lay in bed, wide awake. The silence felt heavy, like it was pressing down on her. Then she heard it, this faint whisper coming through the walls. At first, she thought she was imagining things, but then she heard something else, footsteps in the hallway outside her door. Her heart racing, Maya grabbed her flashlight and crept out into the hall. Nothing looked out of place, but the whispers were getting louder. They seemed to be coming from outside. Taking a deep breath, Maya opened the front door and stepped out. The night air was cool and smelled like decay. She shone her flashlight around the yard, and that's when she saw them. Tiny footprints in the dirt, leading into the woods. They were way too small to be from a person, and it looked like whatever made them wasn't wearing shoes. Maya followed the trail, her hands shaking. The deeper she went into the forest, the darker it got. Branches kept scratching at her arms, and the whispers got louder and louder. She could hear voices speaking in languages she didn't understand, but one phrase kept repeating, "They're here." Suddenly, Cole ran past her, hissing like crazy. He stopped at the edge of a clearing, his back arched. In the middle of the clearing was this massive tree, and Maya swore she could see it pulsing, like it had a heartbeat. Its branches stretched out weirdly far, blocking out the stars. Before Maya could do anything, the ground started shaking. Huge roots burst out of the dirt, wrapping around the tree like they were protecting it. Maya stumbled backward, tripping over a root and falling hard. When she looked up again, everything was gone. The tree, the roots, even Cole. All that was left was the sound of whispering, still echoing in her ears. By the time Maya got back to the cabin, she was shaking so bad she could barely open the door. She climbed into bed and pulled the covers tight, but she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those carved faces in the trees, their mouths open in silent screams. Something was seriously wrong with Pine Hollow, and deep down Maya knew the forest wasn't going to let them leave, at least not anytime soon. Roots of the curse. Maya woke up feeling like someone was watching her. The whispers from last night were still stuck in her head, and she couldn't stop thinking about those tiny footprints leading into the woods or that weird pulsing tree in the clearing. She tossed and turned all night, dreaming about faces carved into trees and roots grabbing at her legs. She decided to go check out the property some more. Jake was already out taking pictures for Instagram, and Clayton was in the shed, fiddling with tools. But something seemed off about him. His hands were shaking, and he kept looking over his shoulder like he was scared of something. As Maya walked towards the woods, she found this old wooden box buried under some leaves. Inside was a journal, all yellowed and crumbly. It belonged to some guy named Thomas Grayson, which gave Maya the creeps because it sounded familiar somehow. The journal talked about loggers coming to cut down trees, even though the local tribes warned them not to touch the whispering pines. They said those trees held the spirits of their ancestors. But the loggers didn't listen. Things got pretty dark after that. Animals started disappearing. Kids went missing in the woods, and creepy carvings showed up on trees overnight. The last entry just said, "They're watching us. They know what we've done." Maya had so many questions. Who were they? What had been done? And why did this story feel so personal? When she got back to the cabin, Jake was there looking freaked out. He showed her a picture he'd taken. There was this shadowy figure in the background, staring right at the camera. Jake swore he hadn't seen anyone when he took the photo. Then Clayton came in all angry, telling them to stop snooping around because it wasn't safe. Maya tried to get him to explain, but he just mumbled something and stormed off. That night, even the cat was acting weird. Cole was pacing around, hissing at nothing and scratching at the door like he wanted to escape. It felt like whatever was out there in the woods was getting closer. Maya couldn't sleep, so she read the journal again. Suddenly, the lights went out. In the dark, she heard those whispers again, but now they were saying actual words. "Feed us." She grabbed a flashlight and went outside. The forest looked extra creepy with long shadows everywhere. When she got to the clearing, that big pulsing tree was there, but this time there was a figure in ragged clothes standing next to it. It pointed at Maya and said in this weird, echoing voice, "You shouldn't have come back." Then everything went black. Maya woke up on the porch steps with Cole next to her. Her head hurt, and she had all these flashes of memories that weren't hers. People screaming, hands digging in dirt, teeth biting into flesh. Whatever was going on, it wasn't just about the forest. It was about her family and some old buried secret. The curse was awake now, and it wasn't done with them yet. Bloodlines. The old journal's words haunted Maya like a persistent ghost. They're watching us. They know what we've done. It felt personal now, as if someone had scribbled those words just for her family. She needed answers, and only Clayton might have them. While Jake wandered off with his camera, Maya cornered her dad in the shed. He'd been hiding out there for days, pretending to fix things. His hands shook as he fiddled with a rusty wrench, avoiding her eyes. "You worked here before, didn't you?" Maya asked, point blank. Clayton went still. "What makes you think that?" he mumbled. "That journal I found. It talked about loggers cutting down sacred trees. You were part of that, weren't you?" Clayton let out a heavy sigh and finally faced her. Guilt was etched into every line of his face. "Alice," he admitted quietly. "But we didn't know what we were doing back then. None of us did. We thought they were just trees, you know." Maya's stomach twisted. "And after? When did people start vanishing? When did things get weird around here?" Clayton's jaw clenched. By then, it was too late. Some guys tried to leave, but bad things happened. Accidents, or worse. He shook his head, his voice dropping. "I kept my head down and stayed quiet. When I finally got out, I swore I'd never come back." Right on cue, the ground shook beneath them, and a low groan echoed from the forest. Clayton flinched, his eyes darting to the trees. That night, Clayton's guilt took on a life of its own. As he nursed the whiskey alone, dark veins spread across his arms like twisted roots. He winced, clawing at his skin as if trying to rip out the corruption. "Dad," Maya called softly. She gasped when she saw the unnatural markings. "What's happening to you?" "I don't know," Clayton croaked, "but I can hear them calling my name." Sure enough, whispers seeped through the walls. Voices chanted words only Clayton seemed to understand. But one phrase rang out clear. "You owe us." Maya wanted to comfort him, but fear rooted her to the spot. Whatever was happening to her father, it was tied to his past sins, and it wasn't finished with him yet. Meanwhile, Jake had become a ghost himself, spending hours alone in the woods. Maya barely saw him anymore. He always came back late, covered in dirt and scratches, claiming he'd been chasing animals to photograph. But tonight was different. Jake stumbled, and just after sunset, clothes torn, fresh cuts lining his arms and neck. His face was pale, eyes wide with terror. "What happened?" Maya demanded, rushing to him. "I followed her," Jake whispered hoarsely, collapsing onto the couch. "A girl, in white. She led me deep into the woods. I thought she was lost, so I tried to help." He trailed off, shuddering. "But then she just vanished into thin air." Before Maya could ask more, Cole darted in, hissing and clawing at the door. It was like the cat sensed something terrible was coming. As days passed, strange things started happening to Maya too. At first it was subtle, reflections in windows flickering like someone else was behind her. But soon, it got worse. One night, while brushing her teeth, Maya looked in the mirror and froze. For a split second, another face stared back, eyes wide with terror. She spun around, heart pounding, but no one was there. "Did you see that?" she whispered to Cole, who watched silently from the doorway, his eyes glowing faintly. Cole meowed softly, rubbing against her leg, but the comfort didn't last. That night, as Maya lay awake, she heard the whispers again, louder now, pressing against her mind. Flashes of memory flooded her thoughts, faces screaming in terror, hands clawing in dirt, mouths biting into flesh. These weren't her memories, they belonged to someone else. Desperate for answers, Maya went back to the clearing with a massive tree. This time, she brought Jake, hoping he might recognize the girl in white. "This is insane," Jake muttered nervously as they pushed through the bushes. "Why are we even here?" "We need answers," Maya said firmly. "Whatever's happening to us, it's tied to this place." When they reached the clearing, the tree seemed even bigger, its branches stretching unnaturally wide, blotting out the stars. At its base stood the cloaked figure Maya had seen before. Its bony hand pointed straight at Jake. "You shouldn't have come back," it rasped, its voice echoing strangely in the quiet. Before they could move, thick roots burst from the ground, wrapping around Jake's legs. He screamed, fighting to get free, but the roots only pulled him closer to the tree. "Let him go," Maya shouted, lunging forward. But the figure raised its other hand, and the ground shook violently, knocking her down. Jake's screams faded as the roots dragged him into the tree's gaping maw, which opened impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. By the time Maya got to her feet, the clearing was empty. The tree, the figure, even Jake, all gone. Only Cole remained, fur standing on end as he hissed angrily at the spot where Jake had vanished. Back at the cabin, Maya collapsed on the porch steps, Cole curled protectively beside her. Her head throbbed, and pieces of Jake's memories, not hers, flashed through her mind. Running through the woods, chasing a ghostly figure in white, feeling cold roots wrap around his ankles. Whatever curse haunted Pine Hollow, it wasn't content just to scare them. It was feeding on their guilt, their fears, their very lives. And Maya realized, with growing dread, that she might be next. The forest remembered everything, and it wasn't done collecting what it was owed. Hunger of the forest. It feeds on fear. The whispers had become unbearable. They no longer lingered faintly in the background like distant murmurs. Now they were deafening, overlapping voices, chanting phrases in languages none of them could recognize. Shh, growl. It was as though the forest itself had awakened, its roots and branches twisting into a collective entity that thrived on their terror. Inside the cabin, objects began moving inexplicably. A chair knocked over in an empty room, bang thud. A spoon clattering to the floor moments after being placed on the counter, clink clatter. Doors slammed shut without warning, bang slam, and shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls, even during daylight hours. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on Maya's chest, making it hard to breathe. Clayton's condition worsened with each passing day. Dark veins spread further up his arms, curling around his neck like gnarled tree roots. Crack, crackle, pop. He muttered constantly under his breath. apologizing to invisible figures or pleading for forgiveness. His guilt manifested physically. His skin cracked and bled, as though the earth itself was reclaiming him. Maya tried to keep herself together for what remained of her family, but the strain was taking its toll. She barely slept, haunted by fragments of memories not her own, faces screaming in agony, hands clawing at dirt, mouths biting into flesh. Snap, crunch, gnash. Each vision left her more disoriented than before, as if the spirits were trying to overwrite her identity with their own. One night, unable to endure the cacophony any longer, Maya followed the whispers into the woods. The forest loomed ominously before her, its shadows stretching unnaturally long despite the pale light of the moon filtering through the canopy. Every step felt heavier, as though the ground resisted her presence. Groan, squeak, crunch. When she reached the clearing from the previous nights, the massive tree stood waiting for her, its trunk pulsating faintly, as if alive. Surrounding it were gnarled stumps, their jagged edges resembling broken teeth, gnashing silently in the darkness. Snap, gnash, roar. In the center of the clearing, the cloaked figure reappeared, its skeletal hand pointing directly at Maya. "You shouldn't have come back," it rasped, its voice echoing unnaturally in the stillness. Before Maya could react, thick roots burst from the soil, curling tightly around her legs. Snap, crackle, pop. Panic surged through her veins as she struggled against their grasp, but the roots only pulled her closer to the tree. Its gaping maw yawned impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Snap, gnash, roar. "You are bound to this land," the figure intoned, its voice cold and hollow. "Your bloodline carries the sins of those who came before you. The forest demands repayment." Maya screamed, thrashing wildly as the roots dragged her toward the tree's mouth. Just as she thought it was over, Cole darted into the clearing, hissing fiercely, hiss, screech, and launching himself at the figure. For a brief moment, the creature faltered, its grip loosening just enough for Maya to break free. Summoning every ounce of strength, she stumbled backward, tripping over exposed roots until she collapsed onto the damp forest floor. By the time she looked up again, both the figure and the tree had vanished, leaving behind only the faint sound of whispering. Back at the cabin, things grew even stranger. Cole disappeared shortly after Maya returned, leaving behind only tufts of fur caught on thorny bushes near the edge of the property. Scratch, scrape. Days passed without a sign of him, and Maya feared the worst. Then one evening, he reappeared, limping weakly through the front door, his sleek black coat marred by patches of missing fur. Teeth marks lined his flank, raw and bleeding, lick slurp, as though something or someone had attacked him. Despite his injuries, Cole seemed determined to stay close to Maya, curling protectively beside her whenever she sat down. "What happened to you?" Maya whispered, gently stroking his battered body. Cole let out a soft meow. Meow double mew, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Though he couldn't speak, Maya sensed that he'd been sent back as a warning, a harbinger of worse things to come. Meanwhile, Clayton continued to deteriorate. One morning, Maya found him lying unconscious on the porch, his arms covered in fresh wounds that resembled claw marks, ripe tear dotted. Blood seeped steadily from the gashes, pooling beneath him in dark puddles. She called out for help, but there was no one nearby to hear her cries. Desperate, she dragged him inside and tended to his injuries as best she could. As she cleaned the wounds, she noticed something horrifying. The veins spreading across his skin weren't just markings anymore. They pulsed faintly, as though alive, and tiny buds resembling seedlings began sprouting from the edges of the cuts. Snap, crackle, pop. "Dad, wake up," Maya pleaded, shaking him gently. But Clayton remained unresponsive, his breathing shallow and labored. That night, the whispers returned, louder and angrier than ever. Shh, growl. Objects moved faster, more violently, A lamp shattered against the wall. Crash tinkle, a knife slid off the counter and embedded itself in the floorboards. Thunk clatter. Even the air felt heavier, pressing against Maya's skin like an invisible weight. In the midst of the chaos, Maya realized the truth. The forest wasn't just haunting them, it was feeding on their fear. Every scream, every panicked heartbeat fueled its power, allowing it to grow stronger with each passing day. And if they didn't find a way to stop it soon, the forest would consume them completely. As dawn broke, painting the horizon with streaks of pale orange and pink, Maya knew what she had to do. She couldn't fight the forest alone. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. But deep down, she feared it might already be too late. The forest remembered everything, and it wasn't done collecting debts. Reclamation. To save one, you must lose another. Maya knew she couldn't fight the forest alone. Every night brought new horrors, roots twisting through the cracks in the cabin floor. Snap, crackle, pop. Cole pacing restlessly with glowing eyes, thump, thump, and Clayton muttering feverishly in his sleep. The curse wasn't just haunting them, it was consuming them piece by piece. Desperate for answers, Maya remembered a story Jake had mentioned weeks earlier about an elderly woman who lived on the outskirts of Pine Hollow. Locals whispered that she practiced folk magic, communing with spirits tied to the land. Armed with nothing but determination, Maya set out at dawn, leaving Clayton unconscious on the couch and Cole curled protectively beside him. The forest seemed eerily quiet as she walked, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. Whisper, rustle, hiss. She followed a narrow dirt path until she reached a small, weathered cabin surrounded by overgrown weeds and twisted trees. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, carrying with it the faint scent of burning sage. Knocking hesitantly on the door, Maya was greeted by an elderly woman with sharp, piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through her. Her name was Martha, and though her voice was soft, it carried an authority that made Maya's skin prickle. "You've come seeking help," Martha said without preamble, gesturing for Maya to sit. "But are you prepared for what it will cost?" "What do you mean?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "The forest doesn't forgive easily," Martha explained, pouring a cup of tea that smelled faintly of earth and decay. "Your family disturbed something sacred, a bond between the land and its ancestors. To appease the spirits, a life must be offered willingly." Maya's heart sank. "A life? Whose?" "That choice is yours to make," Martha replied gravely. "But know this, once given, there is no turning back." Before Maya could respond, Martha handed her a ceremonial dagger etched with intricate carvings. "If you choose to act, go to the clearing at midnight. The tree will reveal itself when it senses your resolve." Back at the cabin, Maya found Clayton awake, but weaker than before. His arms were now almost entirely covered in pulsating veins, and tiny seedlings sprouted from his wounds. Snap, crackle, pop. He looked up at her with hollow eyes filled with guilt. "I made a deal," he confessed hoarsely, his voice barely above a whisper. "Years ago, after we left Pine Hollow, I promised the spirits I'd return if they spared you two. I thought I could protect you. So this is our fault?" Maya snapped, anger bubbling beneath her fear. "You bound us to this place, to this curse, and now we're paying the price." Clayton didn't respond, his gaze dropping to the floor. Cole meowed softly, meow mew, curling closer to Maya's leg as if offering silent support. Torn between saving her father and protecting herself, Maya realized the truth. The curse wasn't random, it was personal. It fed on their bloodline, using their guilt and fear to grow stronger. And if someone didn't pay the debt, the forest would consume them all. That night, Maya returned to the clearing, clutching the ceremonial dagger tightly in her hand. The air was thick with tension, pressing against her chest like an invisible weight. As the clock struck midnight, the massive tree emerged from the shadows, its trunk pulsating faintly, as if alive. Its gaping maw yawned wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Snap, gnash, roar. The cloaked figure appeared once more, its skeletal hand pointing directly at her. "You have returned," it rasped, its voice echoing unnaturally in the stillness. "Are you ready to fulfill your promise?" Summoning every ounce of courage, Maya stepped forward, raising the dagger high above her head. "Take me instead," she shouted, plunging the blade into the tree's pulsating heart. Snap, crunch, boom, all. For a moment, everything froze. Then, the ground trembled violently, rumble, shake, boom, and the tree let out a deafening roar, echo, boom, as it collapsed inward, dissolving into ash. Roots retracted from the soil, and the oppressive weight lifted from the land. As the forest exhaled, rumble, shake, boom, Maya fell to her knees, gasping for breath. She expected to feel pain, or perhaps death, but instead she felt nothing. Just emptiness. Back at the cabin, Clayton stirred, his eyes fluttering open. For the first time in days, his breathing was steady, and the veins spreading across his arms began to fade. Cole padded silently to his side, purring softly, purr rumble. But as Maya stood outside the clearing, staring at the charred remains of the cursed tree, she realized something was wrong. Her reflection in a nearby puddle flickered briefly, showing not her face but someone else, a distorted visage with wide, terrified eyes, blank stare. The forest hadn't forgotten. Though the curse had been broken, for now Maya could feel its presence lingering, watching, waiting. The spirits may have accepted her sacrifice, but they weren't done with her yet. By sunrise, the woods seemed almost peaceful again, their shadows retreating into the underbrush. Yet Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she'd merely delayed the inevitable. Somewhere deep within Pine Hollow, roots continued to twist and grow, snap, crackle, pop, whispering promises of vengeance. Shh, shh. And somewhere beyond the veil, the spirits waited patiently for their next reckoning. Epilogue. What remains? The earth keeps its promises. Months had passed since Maya sacrificed herself to destroy the cursed tree, but the scars of Pine Hollow lingered like shadows too stubborn to fade. Jake was the only one left in the cabin now, though left wasn't quite the right word, more like abandoned. Clayton had been discharged from the hospital weeks earlier, his body healed but his spirit irreparably broken. He refused to return to the forest, retreating instead to a small apartment in the city where he spent most of his days staring blankly at the wall, muttering apologies to no one in particular. Jake stayed behind, unwilling, or perhaps unable, to leave. The cabin felt suffocating without Maya's presence, yet something kept him rooted there. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear of what might happen if he tried to run. Whatever the reason, he couldn't shake the feeling that the forest hadn't truly let them go. Cole remained by his side, though the once playful cat now seemed more like a sentinel than a companion. His golden eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, fixed unwaveringly on the trees beyond the window, glow stare. Occasionally, he would pace restlessly around the cabin or hiss at invisible threats, his growl, as if warning Jake of dangers only he could sense. At night, sleep eluded Jake entirely. Every creak of the floorboards, groan, squeak, pop, sent his heart racing, and every gust of wind rattling the windows, whistle, whisper, hiss, made him wonder if the whispers would return. Fragments of Maya's memories haunted him, not hers alone, but those of the spirits she had absorbed during her final moments. Faces screaming in terror, hands clawing at dirt, mouths biting into flesh. Snap, crunch, gnash. One evening, as twilight settled over the mountains, casting long shadows across the cabin, Jake sat alone in the living room nursing a cup of coffee. Cole perched silently on the windowsill, his glowing eyes reflecting the pale moonlight streaming through the glass. Outside, the forest loomed ominously, its branches swaying gently despite the absence of wind. Swish, swish, crick. Suddenly, A faint sound broke the silence. A low, guttural growl emanating from somewhere above. Growl, rumble, thrum. Jake froze, his breath catching in his throat. Slowly, he set the coffee mug down and grabbed a flashlight, its beam cutting sharply through the gloom as he ascended the creaky stairs leading to the attic. Creak, squeak, pop. The attic was cluttered with forgotten relics, old furniture draped in dusty sheets, stacks of yellowed newspapers, and trunks overflowing with tattered clothes. But none of these caught Jake's attention. Instead, his gaze landed on the far wall where a single carving stood out starkly against the weathered wood. It was fresh, oozing sap that dripped steadily onto the floor. Drip, drip. The carving depicted a face twisted in agony. Its mouth opens wide as if screaming silently. Whisper echo. Beneath it, etched crudely into the surface, were 3 words. Panic surged through Jake's veins as he stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a pile of debris. He turned to flee, but before he could reach the stairs, the ground trembled violently. Rumble, shake, boom, and thick roots burst from the soil, curling protectively around the walls. Outside, the forest exhaled, a collective sigh of relief as the oppressive weight returned to the land. Back downstairs, Cole darted into the room, hissing fiercely, his screech, and clawing at the doorframe leading outside. Scratch, scrape. Jake followed him instinctively, stepping onto the porch just in time to see the trees sway unnaturally, their branches twisting together to form a crude doorway. Through it stood the cloaked figure from the clearing, its skeletal hand pointing directly at him. "You shouldn't have stayed," it rasped, its voice echoing unnaturally in the stillness. Before Jake could respond, Cole launched himself at the figure, snarling ferociously. Snarl. For a brief moment, the creature faltered, its grip loosening just enough for Jake to break free. Summoning every ounce of courage, he sprinted toward the woods, hoping to lose whatever pursued him among the gnarled trees. But the forest remembered everything, and it wasn't done collecting debts. Weeks later, the cabin stood empty once again, its windows dark and its doors hanging ajar. Inside, the attic wall bore new carvings, faces twisted in agony, their mouths open wide as if screaming silently. Whisper echo. Beneath them, etched crudely into the surface, were 3 words repeated over and over again. Feed us, feed us. Far away, in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, Pine Hollow waited patiently, its roots spreading further beneath the soil. Snap, crackle, pop, whispering promises of vengeance. Shh. Because sometimes survival isn't freedom, it's just another form of captivity, and the earth always keeps its promises. The echo of my mind. In the quiet town of Boston, Ethan Slater, a reserved and insecure man, is trapped in a mundane routine at a local construction company. His life is a mosaic of unfulfilled desires and haunting memories, particularly the conviction that he accidentally killed his brother, Lucas, a brother who never existed. Ethan's world is turned upside down when he's mysteriously fired by his tyrannical boss, Mr. Carter, pushing him to the brink of despair. As Ethan contemplates ending his life, a call from an unknown number of changes everything. The voice on the other end is his own, claiming to be another Ethan, promising to transform his life. Initially, this mysterious caller brings unforeseen success. Ethan lands his dream job, and his crush, Olivia Monroe, begins to notice him. However, when Ethan confides in Olivia about the calls, the voice turns menacing, unraveling his newfound happiness. Desperate and frightened, Ethan flees to a secluded cabin in Vermont, seeking escape. But the arrival of a stray dog Max and a new landline reignite the horror. Back in Boston, Dr. Emma Taylor reveals to Olivia that Ethan suffers from schizophrenia, and the voice is a manifestation of his own mind. Olivia rushes to Vermont, finding Ethan on the edge of a breakdown. In a race against time, she saves him from an overdose of pills, and together they confront the darkness within. The story weaves a tale of mental struggle, unexpected love, and the perilous journey towards healing, leaving listeners with a lingering sense of unease and hope. Shadows of the Mind. The wind howled through the narrow streets of Boston like a mournful cry, its chill cutting through the thin fabric of Ethan Slater's jacket. He hunched his shoulders, his hands shoved deep into his pockets as he walked home from the local grocery store. The fluorescent lights of the store flickered behind him, casting long shadows on the wet pavement. It was a dreary autumn evening, the kind that made you want to stay indoors, but Ethan had no choice. He needed to pick up a few things for dinner: bread, eggs, maybe some milk if it wasn't expired. Ethan's life was a routine of monotony, a never-ending cycle of work, eat, sleep, repeat. He worked at a local construction company, tearing down old buildings and erecting new ones. The work was grueling both physically and mentally, but it paid the bills. His boss, Mr. Carter, was a man who seemed to take pleasure in making Ethan's life as difficult as possible. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a booming voice and a perpetual scowl. Ethan often wondered how someone so unpleasant could run a business, but he supposed it was because Mr. Carter was good at what he did. Ethan's apartment was a small, one-bedroom place in a run-down building. The walls were thin, and he could often hear the arguments of the couple living next door. The paint was chipped and the carpet was stained, but it was home. He didn't have much: a couch, a television, a small kitchen table, and a bed. But it was enough for him. He didn't need much. As he walked, Ethan's mind wandered to Olivia Monroe. She was the receptionist at the construction company, a woman with long, curly brown hair and bright green eyes. She always had a smile on her face, no matter how bad the day was, and she had a way of making Ethan feel like he was the only person in the room when she spoke to him. He had had a crush on her for months, but he had never mustered the courage to tell her. He was too afraid of rejection, too afraid of ruining the fragile friendship they had. Ethan sighed, his breath visible in the cold air. He didn't know how much longer he could keep this up. His life felt empty, like there was something missing, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. He had always felt this way, even as a child. His parents had been strict, never showing much affection, and he had grown up feeling isolated, alone. He had no siblings, or at least that's what everyone told him. But Ethan was convinced he had had a brother, Lucas, a brother who had never existed. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. He had always been told that Lucas was just a figment of his imagination, a product of his childhood loneliness. But Ethan remembered him, remembered the way he had looked, the way he had smiled. He remembered the day he had died, the day Ethan had accidentally killed him. He had been just a child, no more than 6 years old, but the memory was vivid, haunting. It was a memory that had plagued him for years, a memory that had left him with a deep sense of guilt and shame. When Ethan got home, he set the groceries on the kitchen counter and sat down on the couch. He turned on the television, flipping through the channels until he found something that caught his interest. It was a documentary about mental health, about the struggles of living with schizophrenia. Ethan watched it for a while, his eyes glued to the screen. He had always known that there was something wrong with him, something that set him apart from everyone else. He had heard voices before, voices that weren't there, and he had seen things that no one else could see. But he had never told anyone. He was too afraid of what they would think, too afraid of being judged. The documentary ended, and Ethan turned off the television. He sat in the silence of his apartment, his mind racing. He had an appointment with Dr. Emma Taylor the next day, a psychiatrist who had been helping him for months. She was kind and understanding, with a way of making him feel safe, like he could tell her anything. But he hadn't told her everything, not yet. He was still afraid, still unsure. Ethan got up from the couch and walked to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator, pulling out a bottle of water. As he drank, he thought about the day ahead. He had to go to work in the morning and then his appointment with Dr. Taylor. He was nervous about the appointment, nervous about what she would say. He had been having more episodes lately, more hallucinations, and he knew she would want to adjust his medication. He set the water back on the counter and walked to the bathroom. He looked at himself in the mirror, studying his reflection. He was a thin man with pale skin and dark circles under his eyes. His hair was messy and his clothes were worn. He looked tired, like he had been running on empty for weeks. He sighed, turning away from the mirror. He didn't recognize the man staring back at him. He didn't know who he was anymore. Ethan walked back to the living room and sat down on the couch again. He picked up the remote and turned the television back on, trying to distract himself from the thoughts that plagued him. But it was no use. His mind was a maze of emotions, a never-ending cycle of fear and doubt. He felt like he was drowning, like there was no way out. As the night wore on, Ethan's anxiety grew. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, something that lurked in the shadows, waiting to pounce. He had always been prone to paranoia, but lately, it had been worse. He would hear footsteps in the hallway at night, the creaks and groans of the old building sounding like someone was trying to break in. He would see movement out of the corner of his eye, only to turn and find no one there. It was exhausting, both mentally and physically. Ethan eventually fell asleep, his body giving in to the exhaustion that had been weighing him down for weeks. He slept fitfully, his dreams filled with images of Lucas, of the brother he had lost, the brother who had never existed. He woke up in the middle of the night, his heart pounding, his sheets drenched in sweat. He lay there for a while, trying to catch his breath, trying to calm down. But it was no use. The fear was still there, lingering in the back of his mind, waiting to pounce. When the sun finally rose, Ethan got out of bed. He showered and dressed, his movements mechanically. He didn't have the energy to care about anything anymore. He just wanted to get through the day, to survive. He walked to the kitchen, pouring himself a bowl of cereal. He ate quickly, not tasting the food. He didn't have an appetite. As he finished his cereal, Ethan heard a knock at the door. He froze, his heart racing. He wasn't expecting anyone. He walked slowly to the door, hesitating for a moment before peering through the peephole. It was Olivia Monroe standing in the hallway with a concerned look on her face. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't seen her outside of work before, and he wasn't sure why she was here. He opened the door, trying to hide his surprise. "Olivia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Olivia smiled, her green eyes sparkling in the dim light of the hallway. "I was in the neighborhood," she said. "I thought I'd drop by to see how you're doing." Ethan nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "I'm fine," he lied. "Thanks for asking." Olivia walked into the apartment, her eyes scanning the room. "You don't look fine," she said, her voice soft. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I haven't," he admitted. "I've been having trouble sleeping." Olivia sat down on the couch, motioning for Ethan to join her. "What's going on?" she asked. "You can talk to me, Ethan. I'm here for you." Ethan hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. He didn't want to scare her off, didn't want her to think he was crazy. But a part of him wanted to tell her everything, to let her in. He took a deep breath, letting his words spill out. "I've been having these hallucinations," he said. "I've been hearing voices, seeing things that aren't there. I've been feeling like someone's watching me, like something's out to get me." Olivia listened, her expression unreadable. Ethan waited for her to say something, to react, but she just sat there, her eyes locked on his. "What do you think is happening to me?" he asked, his voice shaking. Olivia reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "I think you're struggling," she said. "I think you need help, Ethan. You need to talk to someone to get the help you need." Ethan nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. He had been so afraid of being judged, of being rejected, but Olivia wasn't judging him. She was concerned, genuinely concerned. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for understanding." Olivia smiled, squeezing his arm gently. "I'm here for you," she said. "Always." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Maybe he could find a way to heal, to move on from the past. But as he looked into Olivia's eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that something was watching them from the shadows, waiting for them to strike. And then, just as he was starting to feel like everything might be okay, the phone rang. The call that changed everything. The fluorescent lights of Mr. Carter's office flickered, casting an eerie glow on the polished wooden desk. Ethan Slater sat stiffly in the worn leather chair, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The air smelled of stale coffee and the faint tang of cologne that clung to Mr. Carter like a second skin. Outside, the sounds of Boston hummed faintly. Car horns, distant chatter, the wail of a siren. But inside, the silence was oppressive. Mr. Carter, a man in his late 50s with a paunchy stomach and a receding hairline, leaned back in his chair. His arms were crossed and his expression was a mask of disdain. "Ethan," he began, his voice dripping with malice, "you've been with this company for 5 years, but I'm afraid your performance has been subpar. You're constantly late, your work is sloppy, and frankly, you're just not cutting it anymore." Ethan's heart raced. He could feel the sweat trickling down his spine, soaking into the fabric of his button-down shirt. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend himself, but the words caught in his throat. His mind raced, thoughts swirling in a chaotic storm. What will I do? How will I pay my bills? What about Olivia? "Consider this your official termination," Mr. Carter said, his voice firm but monotone. He slid a thin envelope across the desk. "Your final paycheck. You're done here, Slater. Don't come back." Ethan stared at the envelope, his hands trembling as he picked it up. It felt light, insignificant, a meager sum for 5 years of his life. He stood, his legs wobbly, and turned toward the door. The handle felt cold in his hand. He hesitated, glancing back at Mr. Carter, who was already dismissing him with a wave of his hand. The office was quiet as Ethan walked out. The other employees avoided eye contact, their faces downcast. Ethan's cheeks burned with shame. He stepped into the bright afternoon sunlight, the cool breeze offering little solace. He walked aimlessly, his feet carrying him toward the park where he often ate his lunch. The bench creaked as he sat down, the wood rough against his hands. Ethan pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Olivia, he thought, his finger hovering over her name. But he couldn't bring himself to call her. What would he say? "Hey, Liv, guess what? I just got fired." The thought made his stomach twist with nausea. The park was quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustle of leaves in the wind. Ethan's mind wandered to Lucas, the brother he'd never had. He could almost hear Lucas's voice, teasing him, laughing with him. But then the memory twisted, and he was back to that night, the night he'd convinced himself he'd killed Lucas. His breath hitched and he pressed his hands to his temples, as if he could physically push the thoughts away. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the silence. He pulled it out, his heart leaping when he saw Olivia's name on the screen. But before he could answer, the call went to voicemail. He sighed, shoving the phone back into his pocket. As the darkness deepened, Ethan made his way home. His apartment was small. The walls were painted a dull gray. He flipped on the light, the bulb flickering momentarily before steadying. The silence was suffocating. He walked to the kitchen, grabbing a beer from the fridge. The can hissed as he opened it, the sound amplified in the quiet space. Ethan sat on the couch, the cushions sagging under his weight. He took a long swig of the beer, the bitter taste burning his throat. His phone sat on the coffee table, its screen dark. He stared at it, willing it to ring, but it didn't. Instead, the landline rang. The sound was jarring, a shrill roaring that pierced the silence. Ethan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't used that phone in years. It was an old rotary dial, a relic his grandmother had left behind. He stared at it, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The phone rang again, the sound echoing through the empty apartment. Ethan's palms were slick with sweat as he reached for it. His hand hesitated, hovering over the receiver. And then, with a deep breath, he picked it up. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was familiar. It was his voice. "Ethan," the voice said, smooth and calm, with a hint of amusement. "It's me, or, well, it's you. Another you from a different time, a different place. You're struggling, Ethan. I know it. But I'm here to help. I'm here to make your life better. Are you ready to take control?" Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice shaking. The voice chuckled, the sound low and menacing. "Oh, Ethan, I'm you, or at least a part of you. A part you've been trying to ignore. You've been stuck in this rut for so long, letting life pass you by. But I'm here to change that. Together we can make your life everything you've ever dreamed it could be." As the voice spoke, Ethan felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. It was as if the weight he'd been carrying for so long was lifting, ever so slightly. "How?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just listen," the voice said. "Trust me, and soon you'll see. Your life is about to change in ways you never imagined." The line went dead, and Ethan was left standing there, the phone still clutched in his hand. The room felt different now, the shadows cast by the dim light twisting into strange shapes. He hung up the phone, his mind racing with questions. Who was that? And how did they know his voice? As he sat back down on the couch, the weight began to creep back in. The voice had promised change, but all Ethan could feel was the crushing uncertainty of his future. And then, as he sat there in the silence, he heard it. A knock at the door. Tap, da-da, tap, da-it, tap, da-da. Ethan's heart leaped. He hadn't ordered anything, and he wasn't expecting anyone. He hesitated, then slowly got to his feet. The knocking came again, louder this time. "Who is it?" he called out, his voice shaky. There was no answer. Ethan's breath came in short, sharp gasps as he approached the door. He peered through the peephole, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly. He stepped back, his mind racing. The knocking started again, this time more insistent. Tap, da-da-it, tap, da-da, tap, da-da. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. He turned it slowly, the metal cold beneath his palm. And as he pulled the door open, the knocking stopped. The hallway was empty, but on the floor, just outside his door, was a small piece of paper. It was folded neatly into a square. Ethan picked it up, his hand shaking as he unfolded it. On the inside, a single sentence was scrawled in red ink. "I'm always with you." Ethan's breath caught. He looked around, but the hallway was still empty. He stepped back into his apartment, slamming the door shut behind him. His heart was racing and his mind was spiraling. The phone rang again. This time, Ethan knew better. He didn't answer. Instead, he sat on the couch, the paper clutched in his hand, and waited for the dawn to come. But as the night wore on, the shadows in the room seemed to grow longer, darker, and the silence became almost unbearable. And then, just as the first light of the sun began to creep through the windows, Ethan heard the knock again. Tap, dot, dot. Tap, dot, dot. Tap dot. This time, he didn't get up to answer. He knew who it was. The rise and fall. Ethan stepped into the sleek, modern office, the glass walls reflecting the city's vibrant energy. The hum of computers and muted chatter filled the air, a stark contrast to the monotony of his previous job. His new role as a marketing analyst brought him a sense of pride and purpose, each day a step away from his mundane past. Olivia Monroe, with a bright smile and curious nature, became a beacon of hope in Ethan's blossoming social life. Their lunch meetings at a cozy cafe, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the clatter of dishes, provided moments of genuine connection. Olivia's laughter echoed warmly as they shared stories, her eyes sparkling with interest, making Ethan feel seen and valued. However, the shadow of the mysterious voice loomed large. Ethan's phone buzzed one afternoon, the low, ominous ringtone slicing through the cafe's ambience. "You think she's trustworthy?" The voice sneered, cold and menacing, as Olivia excused herself. Ethan's heart raced, the voice's tone a stark shift from its previous warmth, leaving him unsettled. At work, a rival emerged in the form of Greg, a colleague who eyed Ethan's success with suspicion. His whispered comments and sideways glances created an undercurrent of tension, adding to Ethan's growing unease. Meanwhile, Sarah, a friendly designer, offered support, her kindness a comforting contrast to Greg's hostility. Ethan's mental struggles intensified. He began noticing strange symbols on his notes, and the sound of whispers lingered in quiet moments. One evening, he found an old voicemail from an unknown number, the voice claiming to know Lucas, Ethan's non-existent brother. The message ended abruptly, leaving Ethan questioning his reality. As the voice's influence grew, Ethan's world started to unravel. Hallucinations of shadowy figures and disembodied whispers became more frequent, blurring the lines between reality and delusion. The once promising horizon now darkened with each passing day, the voice's menacing presence a constant reminder of the chaos within. The chapter closes with Ethan standing at the precipice, the voice's sinister laughter echoing in his mind. The city lights twinkle outside his window, but the shadows within cast a more ominous glow, foreshadowing the horror yet to come. Escape to nowhere. Ethan's tires crunched against the gravel as he wound through the desolate Vermont roads. The dense woods towered around him, their autumn leaves a riot of oranges and reds in the fading light. The GPS led him further from civilization, the silence a stark contrast to Boston's relentless energy. He had hoped the isolation would offer solace, a place to escape the haunting voice, but deep down he knew it was futile. The cabin stood alone, nestled among towering pines, its wooden fade weathered to a soft gray. Ethan stepped out, the crisp air biting at his nose, and gazed at the structure. The world here was still, save by the rustling leaves and distant owl hoots. He felt a moment of peace, but it was short-lived. As he unpacked, a scruffy stray dog appeared at the edge of the woods, its fur-matted eyes wary. Ethan hesitated, then offered him a sandwich from his bag. The dog Max warmed up slowly, becoming a silent companion in the empty cabin. For a brief moment, Ethan felt a connection, a sense of normalcy. The peace shattered the next morning with a jarring phone ring. Ethan's heart raced as he stared at the old landline. It shouldn't be working. The ring cut through the air like a knife, each peal echoing his paranoia. He lifted the receiver, his voice trembling. "Hello?" "Hello, Ethan," the voice replied, familiar yet different. It was his voice, yet not his. It was sharper, with a sinister edge. Ethan's breath hitched. "You can't escape me." Max whined as if sensing Ethan's fear. The voice continued, echoing memories, twisting them into taunts. Ethan's grip tightened on the receiver. "Who are you?" The voice laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "I'm you, the you who knows the truth." It spoke of Lucas, of the accident, of guilt Ethan couldn't shake. The voice grew louder, more menacing, until Ethan slammed the phone down, his hands shaking. Days passed, each filled with the voice's relentless torment. It called at dawn, at dusk, in the dead of night. Ethan became a shadow, sleepless and paranoid. Max stayed close, but Ethan's anxiety was contagious. The dog grew skittish, barking at unseen threats. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan found a stack of old letters in the attic. They were addressed to him, filled with love and worry from parents he'd never known. A photo fell out showing a boy who looked like him but with a mischievous grin. Lucas. The name sent a shiver down his spine. The voice was right. Ethan had never known a brother, yet the letters spoke of shared memories, of a bond he couldn't recall. Confusion and fear tangled in his mind. Was everything a lie? He thought of Dr. Taylor, her words about his condition. But the voice felt real, more real than the letters in his hand. The phone rang again, shrill in the silence. Ethan ignored it, but the voice echoed in his mind. You can't hide, Ethan. You'll never be free. The words looped until he couldn't distinguish reality from delusion. In the distance, the woods whispered secrets only the wind understood. Ethan, lost in his turmoil, felt the darkness closing in, the voice growing louder, urging him towards the edge. Max's anxious presence was the only anchor, but even that was tenuous. As night fell, the phone rang once more. Ethan lifted it, the voice booming, "You're mine now." He felt the weight of his past bearing down, the room spinning. The pills on the table tempted him, a way to silence the voice forever. In the end, it was Max's presence, his unwavering loyalty, that kept Ethan grounded. The dog's eyes, filled with a deep, unspoken understanding, reminded Ethan of the connection he still had to reality. The voice raged on, but Ethan knew he couldn't give in, not yet. The horror was real, but so was the hope that he might find peace, that the echoes of his mind could one day fade. As the sun rose, casting pale light through the trees, Ethan realized the escape was only a reprieve. The real battle lay within, and he wasn't alone. With Max by his side, he stole himself to face whatever came next, knowing the journey ahead would be fraught with terror, but also with the promise of healing. The truth unveiled. The rain poured down on Boston like a relentless curtain of sorrow, each droplet echoing the heaviness in Olivia Monroe's heart. She sat in Dr. Emma Taylor's cozy office, the soft hum of a radiator and the faint scent of lavender tea filling the air. Dr. Taylor, a woman in her early 50s with warm, comforting eyes, sat across from her, flipping through a file. "Ethan's condition is more severe than I initially thought," Dr. Taylor began, her voice gentle but firm. "He suffers from schizophrenia, Olivia. The voice he's been hearing, it's not a real person. It's a part of his mind, a personality fragment that's become dominant due to his trauma." Olivia's hands trembled as she clutched her coffee mug. "So the calls, they're all in his head," she whispered, her mind racing to the times Ethan had spoken about the mysterious voice. She had always suspected something was wrong, but this was more than she had imagined. Dr. Taylor nodded. "Yes, Ethan's alternate persona has become so vivid, so real to him that it's begun to take control. The voice promising to transform his life? It's his own mind trying to escape the pain of his past. But as the illness progresses, the voice has turned on him, amplifying his fears and insecurities." Olivia's thoughts drifted to Ethan's quiet, reserved nature. She had always sensed the depth of his pain, the way he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, but she had no idea it was this bad. "What about Lucas?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He thinks he killed his brother, but Lucas never existed, did he?" Dr. Taylor sighed, her expression sympathetic. "No, Lucas is a product of Ethan's fractured mind, a manifestation of his guilt and grief over something else entirely. Ethan's past is littered with unspoken pain, Olivia. pain he's never confronted. Olivia's heart ached. She had always admired Ethan's quiet strength, the way he seemed to endure everything life threw at him with stoic resilience. But now, she saw the cracks in that facade. And now he's gone to Vermont, she murmured. He thinks he can escape it. Dr. Taylor leaned forward. Ethan's running from himself, Olivia, and if he doesn't get help, the voice, it could consume him entirely. Olivia set the mug down, her resolve hardening. I need to find him, she said firmly. I can't let him go through this alone. Dr. Taylor nodded. You're the only one who can reach him right now, but be careful, Olivia. Ethan's in a dangerous state of mind. The line between reality and delusion is thinning for him. With that, Olivia left the office, the rain-soaked streets of Boston blurring around her as she rushed to her car. She had to find Ethan before it was too late. The drive to Vermont was a blur of dark skies and winding roads, the GPS leading Olivia deeper into the wilderness with every passing mile. The trees grew taller and closer together here, their branches creaking ominously in the wind. It was as if the world itself was warning her to turn back. But Olivia pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest. She had always cared for Ethan, more than she had ever admitted aloud. She couldn't let him face this alone. When she finally arrived at the secluded cabin, her breath caught in her throat. The cabin was small, its wooden walls weathered and overgrown with vines. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, but there was something unsettling about the place, something that made her skin crawl. She stepped out of the car, her shoes crunching on the gravel driveway. The air was eerily quiet, save for the distant howl of a stray animal. Max, Ethan's stray dog, emerged from the shadows, his fur matted and his eyes watchful. He barked once, as if warning her away before disappearing into the woods. Olivia hesitated, her hand on the door handle. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Stepping inside, she called out, "Ethan, are you here?" There was no answer. The cabin was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of old wood and something else. Something bitter. Olivia's eyes adjusted slowly, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The room was cluttered with papers, notes scrawled in Ethan's handwriting covering every inch of the walls. Some were coherent, others nonsensical, but all spoke of a mind spiraling out of control. "Ethan!" she called again, her voice trembling now. She found him in the bedroom, lying on the floor beside an empty bottle of pills. His breathing was shallow, his face pale. Olivia's heart stopped as she rushed to his side. "Ethan!" she screamed, shaking him. "Wake up. Oh God, please wake up." His eyes flickered open, but they were empty eyes she knew. They were distant, empty, as if the man she loved had vanished entirely. "I'm sorry, Olivia," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I couldn't stop it. The voice, it told me I didn't deserve to live." Olivia's tears streamed down her face as she cradled him in her arms. "You do deserve to live, Ethan," she said fiercely. "You deserve to fight. Let me help you. Let me be here for you." Ethan's gaze met hers, and for a moment she saw the real him. Scared, broken, but still holding on. "I'm so tired," he murmured. "I don't know who I am anymore." Olivia held him tighter. "I know who you are," she said softly. "You're the man I care about, the man who deserves to heal." As she spoke, the room seemed to shift around them, the shadows retreating as if pushed back by her words. The voice in Ethan's head screamed in defiance, but Olivia's presence was a light in the darkness, a reminder that he wasn't alone. Slowly, Ethan's breathing steadied, his eyes closing as exhaustion took over. Olivia held him until the tension in his body eased, until the fight left him. She knew the road ahead would be long, filled with twists and turns that would test both of them. But at that moment she also knew that she wouldn't let Ethan face it alone. Not now. Not ever. And as the darkness receded, Olivia realized that the true horror wasn't the voice in Ethan's head. It was the silence that followed when no one was there to listen. The final confrontation. The cabin in Vermont was cloaked in darkness, the only sound the creaking of old wooden beams and the distant howl of wind through the trees. Ethan lay on the floor, his hand trembling as it hovered over the scattered pills. His eyes, clouded by tears and disorientation, struggled to focus. The voice in his head was relentless, a constant whisper urging him to end the pain. "You're worthless, Ethan," it hissed. "No one wants you. You should have died instead of Lucas." Suddenly, the creak of the cabin door broke the silence. Olivia stepped in, her breath visible in the chilly air. Her heart pounded as she spotted Ethan. "Ethan!" she exclaimed, rushing to his side. Her hands shook as she gathered the pills, her mind racing with fear. Ethan's gaze drifted towards her, his expression a mix of confusion and despair. "Olivia," he murmured, his voice barely audible. The voice in his head growled, "Don't trust her. She'll leave you like everyone else." Olivia cradled his face, her voice soft but urgent. "Ethan, I'm here. You're safe now." But Ethan was slipping away, the voice overpowering his reality. He pushed her away, desperation clawing at his chest. "No, you don't understand. I have to do this." In the corner, Max, the stray dog, watched with anxious eyes. He whined softly, as if sensing Ethan's turmoil. His presence was a comforting shadow, a silent supporter in the midst of chaos. As Olivia struggled to hold Ethan, the voice in his head roared, "Let go, Ethan. It's the only way." Ethan's body tensed, his hands clenched into fists. Suddenly he was transported to a dark, mirrored room in his mind, where his alternate persona stood before him. The doppelganger sneered, "You're weak, Ethan. I'm the real you." In this surreal confrontation, Ethan found a spark of strength. He remembered Olivia's warmth, Dr. Taylor's guidance, and Max's unwavering presence. "No," he whispered, his voice growing firmer. "I'm not alone. I have Olivia, Max, and Dr. Taylor. They care." The doppelganger's image wavered, the voice in his head faltering. Ethan took a deep breath, his resolve clearer now. He reached out, and the image dissipated, leaving him in the quiet of the cabin with Olivia by his side. Olivia held him close, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I'm here, Ethan. We'll get through this together." Max nuzzled his hand, a gentle reminder of support. Conclusion: a path to healing. Ethan's journey was far from over, but with Olivia and Dr. Taylor's support, he began to heal. Therapy sessions and newfound routines brought structure to his life. The voice in his head still lingered, but it no longer controlled him. He learned to recognize its deceit, finding strength in his support system. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan found moments of peace. He and Olivia would walk through the woods, Max leading the way, the crisp air, a reminder of life's beauty. They spoke of hope and future plans, their bond growing stronger. Yet, the shadows of his mind still whispered, a reminder of his ongoing battle. Ethan understood that healing was a journey, not a destination. With each step forward, he faced his fears, knowing he wasn't alone. The story of Ethan Slater leaves us with a lingering unease, a reminder of the fragility of the mind and the power of human connection. In the quiet moments, when darkness creeps in, we hear the echo of Ethan's voice, a testament to resilience and hope.